Nightingale Conant presents Wayne Dyer, Choosing Your Own Greatness, an approach to self-discovery and personal fulfillment.
Everybody deserves our love. And until we start thinking that way, we're going to always have dichotomies. We're going to always have you versus me, us versus them. And as long as there's that usness and me-ness and you-ness, there will never be all of us together. Your thought processes create the images that you have. Those images create the behavior. And you can't back one up from the other unless you're willing to think that it's going to work out, and that's the premise you're operating from. That's a very important point for people if they want to be enlightened. If you believe that it's going to work out, then you'll start to see opportunities. If you don't, then you'll see obstacles. I've never believed that people who work real hard and do all the right things make a lot of money and then become successful. I think it's the other way around. I think successful people make a lot of money at whatever they do and make a lot of friends and all of that, because the successful person is someone who has it within them. When you are looking for love, it will always elude you. When you're looking for happiness, it will always elude you. When you become those things, it's just there, and it begins to own you. You don't have it, it has you. It has a hold of you.
At Nightingale Conant, we've discovered that you and others who include cassette listening in their way of life can truly be described as people seeking greater enlightenment. And we've also discovered that enlightened people don't resist change. They choose change and make it happen. In their own lives, they choose to change and grow, and then change and grow some more. Wayne Dyer is one of those rare individuals who has repeatedly celebrated this quality of change and growth, both in his cassettes and books, and also in his approach to living the most fulfilling life possible. Author of the highly acclaimed self-discovery cassette programs, How to Be a No-Limit Person, and Secrets of the Universe, and the best-selling books, Your Erroneous Zones, Pulling Your Own Strings, The Sky's the Limit, and Gifts from Icus, Dr. Dyer is one of America's best-known contemporary psychologists. In this, the newest of his cassette programs, Dr. Dyer continues to share his profound and inspirational perceptions through a series of live engagements which have inspired his listeners to smiles, tears, and often laughter, but never failed to touch them with a greater sense of self-understanding and personal enlightenment. You are also about to experience a unique look into the person behind the public image of world-renowned author, speaker, psychologist. We had the pleasure of recording Dr. Dyer at our Nightingale Conant studios. Throughout these interview segments, you will note an almost dramatic calm, a stillness in Dr. Dyer. That stillness seems to perfectly depict the inner calm of a man who has explored all the realms of self-discovery and comes to you today to share what he has learned. Some of what you hear may surprise you, and some may serve to comfort you on the path you already travel. You also can find inspiration and motivation to seek the light of your own sense of purpose and individual life vision. You can make your way to lasting fulfillment in the life that you live today at this moment. And this moment can be the beginning of a major change for you. It can be, in the truest sense, a turning point. It is for this reason that Dr. Dyer has chosen to begin the program with an anecdote in which he shares a deeply moving story concerning his relationship with his father, a relationship which existed for years in the pain of inner suffering and unforgiving resentment for a father he never knew. This, as you will hear, was just such a turning point for Wayne Dyer. And the conclusion of the story? Well, let's join Wayne as he unfolds this poignant drama.
I got to tell you that back in 1975, I had just come off of a phenomenal experience. I had been searching for my father from the time I was 8 years old. And I had dreams about him all the time. I had never seen this man, and he had been extremely cruel to everybody that he had ever met in his life. All references to him had been most unflattering. His life was an ignominious one in almost every way. And yet there was something inside of me. There was a vengeance. There was an anger. There was a pain. There was a suffering. There was something inside of me that wanted to talk to this man and find out, how do you abandon 3 children? How do you do that? And how do you leave a woman and never pay her any child support? And how do you beat somebody up and rape them and create a pregnancy that way? And how do you use alcohol to destroy yourself? And the endless stories that I had heard sort of backhand, because it was too painful even for my mother to talk about. How do you do that? Where does that come from? And I wanted to know, because somehow I thought maybe his leaving was courageous. Maybe he just couldn't stay and face it, and maybe he loved them so much and he had to leave. Who knows? If you don't know, you just wonder, don't you? And you just think about it. And I thought about it. My other 2 brothers couldn't have cared less about any of it. They were not interested at all. They didn't have any memory either. My oldest brother had some slight memory, but my next brother didn't. He was with me through the whole time. And so I must tell you this because it really is relevant. When your purpose starts to become commensurate with what you are doing, when your life each day is exactly the same as what you believe you are here for, suddenly, and it is suddenly, your purpose begins to own you. And you get on such a fast track that nothing can stop you anyway. All right? And this purpose, whatever it may be related to anything in your life. Each one of us has it, and it is a magnificent purpose. And when you live it, it starts to own you. That's the only way I can say it. And this business about my father and the anguish and the pain and the suffering and the dreams and so on wouldn't go out of my life. And in 1975, I was in Columbus, Mississippi, at a school, I think it's called the Mississippi State College for Women or something like that. I had gone to several colleges. I was working for the government. I was a professor at St. John's University in New York, and as a consultant, they asked me to go down to the schools in the South to see how integration was going, whether in fact, then I was supposed to go sort of unannounced and just sit in on classes and find out whether or not there was any integration and so on, and then send a report back. That was my job, and they paid me by the day to do that. And I got to Columbus, Mississippi, and I did all the things I had to do, and I checked it out. I sent my report in. And I had heard that my father had died, but I hadn't had it confirmed, but that it had been in New Orleans, and that's the only thing that I had known. So I started calling, and I called the infirmary, one of the infirmaries in New Orleans, to find out that information. And they said yes. They finally, after a lot of phone calls, they said yes, he died in, and they gave me the year. And I said, well, where is he buried? What happened? I mean, I want to see, was my name on the death certificate as one of his children? What? They said, well, only records we have here, because they're too old now, it had been about 15 years or so. They said his body was shipped to Biloxi, Mississippi. Now, I was only 4 hours from Biloxi. And I looked on the map and I said, I'm going to Biloxi. And I'm going to find out. Now this story is, get ready, okay? I'm going to turn the lights out a little bit. Because this will start making you wonder about what you're doing here. Anywhere, what you're doing anywhere. I decided to rent a car. All right, I had flown to this place. And so I went and rented a car, and it was a 1974, it was a brand new car, Dodge Coronet, blue. And I looked at the odometer, and there was 0.8 of a mile on this car. Now, what the hell did they do? Make it here? I mean, what is this new car doing in Columbus, Mississippi. I didn't understand that at all. And I just kind of made a mental note of it. And I reached down, I wanted to put my seatbelt on, okay? So I reached to get the seatbelt, and in those days they didn't have the shoulder harness things. They just had a belt that went across your lap. So I reached in to get the seatbelt, and I couldn't get it out. It was encased in plastic. I literally had to take the seat out of the car to get at the seatbelt because I wasn't going to go. It's one of those things that I just won't get into a car and drive without a seatbelt. So I reached down in there and got the seat out in there, and I pull it out, and it's all wrapped around, and there's a rubber band around it, and it's in plastic. So I took the rubber band off, and inside the wrapping is a little card, a little business card, and it says, Candlelight Inn, Biloxi, Mississippi. Okay, there's no miles on this car. So I said, all right. I really, at the moment, didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. If you think you got shivers now, just wait. I'm going to take you to Shiverville tonight. And I put the card in my pocket, and I didn't think any more of it. Got in a car, drove down to Biloxi, picked up this guy hitchhiking who was a migrant worker, drove him over to Jackson, Mississippi, I think it was Jackson, and took a little side trip. And it was Friday afternoon, and it was 4:45 on Friday afternoon that I arrived at the outskirts of Biloxi, Mississippi. So I go to a standard gas station right on the outskirts of town. I went to the Yellow Pages, and I said, I'm going to call the 3 cemeteries here in Biloxi, because there's only 3, and find out if Melvin Lyle Dyer is buried here. So I called the first one, no answer. Long, long time, no answer. I called the second one, busy. Okay. So I called the third one, long, long time ringing, and finally the phone answers. I said, I'm calling, my name is Wayne Dyer, blah, 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 and I'm calling to find out if a Melvin Lyle Dyer, he left. He said, I'll be back. And he went away for the longest time. He finally came back. He said, yes. Oh, my heart just ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. I mean, it was like the end of a journey, and it was a lifetime journey. I said, all right, now I got to get there. How do I get there? He said, oh, it's very easy. He said, just look for the Candlelight Inn. He said, we are on the grounds of the Candlelight Inn. And I reached in my pocket just like this. And I said, you mean so-and-so? And he said, yes, that's it. Now, that's a true story. And I went there, and I stood on the grave. I found the place, and I stood there, and I talked. And I had like a dialogue with this man whom I had never met before, whose picture I had never even seen. I had never even seen what he looked like. All right? And I had this long, long dialogue. And what I did during that time was to forgive him for everything that he had done. To my mother, to my brother, especially my oldest brother, who he had done a lot of horrible things to, and anything that he might have done to. I didn't know about forgiveness or how important it was or whether I should do it or anything like that. I didn't know that. I just simply spent the time doing that. And it took about 2.5 hours, and tears were coming down. I can only tell this story now without crying because I've done it a few times. It wasn't long ago when I would tell this story and I would be a wreck. You'd have to carry me off. So this business about forgiveness. Now, I want to tell you that whatever you got going for you in your life in the way of animosity or bitterness or anguish or pain or whatever towards any other human being on our planet, whoever they are and what they've done, that the toxic reaction to that bitterness, it will never let go of you. That forgiveness is like the greatest motivator, if you will, in the world. Towards anyone or anything, hanging on to anything painful or hurtful and so on, I personally believe you've got to let go of. Not only do you have to let go of it, you don't have to make any phone calls. You don't have to let anybody else know that you're doing it. In your heart, you have to purify yourself in such a way that you just simply say, love is forgiving. And that's 2 words, and it's 1 word. When it's 1 word, it's love is forgiving. All right? And that's what it is. You must forgive. And it's also forgiving, so you don't ask anything back of it. After I did that, my whole life became so clear and so focused, and where I was going became so evident, and I left there and I outlined my book the following week. And let me tell you that I have never had a dream about my father since. I have never had a moment's anguish of any kind toward him or anything that he has done. In fact, I am completely at peace with him, and I send him love wherever he is. Whatever is going on in who he is and where he is and what it is, it's all fine. It's all okay. In fact, without those experiences that were the result of some of the things that he had done, my opportunity to help so many people and to create wonderful things for others, including myself, would never, ever have materialized without that. And I see that, and I see the need for that, and I believe in it. And I also want to say to you, whatever you got inside of you is not the result of what anybody else puts there. It's the result of what you decide to have inside of you. Think for a minute about an orange. And when I've given this analogy many times, you take an orange and you squeeze it as hard as you can squeeze it, just, all right? And what comes out? These are easy questions, folks. Honest, don't look puzzled. Everybody passes, all right? Nobody fails tonight. What comes out is orange juice. But the question is, why, when you squeeze an orange real hard, does orange juice come out? And the answer to that is because that's what's inside. These are really easy. They get easier. All right? Now, does it matter who squeezes? Does it matter what instrument you use? Does it matter what time of the day you do it? Does it matter how you do it? When you do it? No. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out of an orange is what's inside. When you squeeze a person and put pressure on a person of any kind, and anger and hatred and stress and tension and depression come out, it isn't because of who is doing the squeezing or when they do it or how they choose to do it. It's because that's what's inside. And if you don't have it inside, it can never come out, no matter who you're living with. No matter how tough it may seem to you. And when somebody cuts you off on the freeway, and you're mad as hell and going to get even with them, and you're going to get up in front of them and slow down and make them see what it's like, it isn't because they cut you off that you're so upset. It's because that's what you carry around inside. And when you stop carrying that around inside, nothing that anybody does can upset you. No one can make a fool of you without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt. No one can depress you. No one can make you anxious. No one can hurt your feelings. No one can make you anything other than what you allow inside. You see, my evolution has brought me to the point of understanding that each human being on our planet must take total responsibility for his own inner development, for his own inner development. And our inner development is something that we ignore a lot as we progress through this whole ladder of life. And I think of a metaphor. The metaphor is like a candle, and the candle flame that is burning inside of you. All right? Now this candle flame, if you take a candle and walk out of here this evening and you see raindrops falling, it'll blow out your candle, and the wind will blow out your candle. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen outside of you that you have absolutely no control over to blow out your candles. Your candles are getting blown out all the time. We have an inner candle flame that must never flicker, though the worst goes before us. And that's perhaps the highest place we can get to in our lives, is to understand that what our own inner development symbolized by that candle flame must never change, must never even flicker. It is our responsibility, not only for ourselves, but for our children as well, to raise them to believe that whatever is going on inside of you is entirely up to you. You own it. It is yours. I'm going to give you another truth. Everything that is happening to you, whoever you are listening right at this moment, everything that's happening to you in your life, you have a voice in. You are creating. If you're not getting along with somebody on the job, if you're having difficulty in your relationships and feeling victimized, if your children don't respect you, look at yourself first and say, what is it about me? And what can I change in order to help myself not feel victimized? Not how can I get them to change? How can I make the world different? It's one of the fundamental problems is that people want the world to be different than it is. The world is perfect. There's no anxiety in it. There's no depression in it. There's no stress in it. Contrary to anything you've heard, the world is not a stressful place. It's a perfect place. You are a part of that world. You are part of the universe. Your perfection is also in your own creation. You're not a mistake. None of it is. There's only anxious thinking. There's only stressful thinking. There's only angry thoughts. There's no anger in the world. When you stop having that and replace that with this serenity I'm talking about, with this peace inside of yourself, you don't even know how to be victimized anymore. It's not like you learn all these strategies. You become healing instead of becoming poison. You are effective rather than trying to get there. You live it. You see, when you get enough inner grace or inner peace or serenity, whatever you want to call it, you feel really positive about yourself, it's almost impossible for you to be controlled and manipulated by anybody else. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, I had to get on an airplane and fly to Chicago. Now, I got on the airplane at 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Fort Lauderdale. The plane took off and flew for 30 minutes, and they couldn't retract the landing gear. They were stuck in the down position, so they had to land the plane in Miami, go back and land it in Miami because they had longer runways. It wasn't an emergency, but I wasn't convinced that they had that foam out there on the runways because they were just seeing if their foam equipment worked. They were trying to convince us there was no emergency and that those ambulances weren't just standing by in case anybody fainted while they watched us land, that there was, in fact, some emergency. I watched people around me on the plane when we were having to do this, and some people were panicked and fearful and scared. There was one couple that jumped and screamed, and there was a lot of interesting reactions, a lot of ashen looks, and a lot of very scared people. And I looked at myself, and I didn't have any of that. I didn't have any of that. It was okay. And I knew I was going to be okay, and I saw myself being okay. It wasn't that I tried very hard not to be fearful. It was that inside of me, there is something that has replaced that fear, and that is called grace or serenity. And it was okay. It was just simply all right, and I was fine. In fact, I was effective. I calmed down the guy next to me. I looked around to see where the emergency exits were because I wanted to know how to get out of this place. I used my mind in a situation where other people might elect panic. I was electing to be conscious, to be intelligent, to save myself if necessary, and I wasn't the least bit afraid. And I know I would have been afraid at an earlier time in my life. That fear, that potential for fear, has been replaced by peace and fulfillment and knowing that when it's my turn, and that's okay too, and that I'm not afraid of any of that. So we landed, okay, and everything was fine. And there was a computer part that was missing that wouldn't give the right signal for the landing gear to go up, so they had to replace the part, and they canceled the flight. And 192 people were on this plane, and it was full. Right? There wasn't an empty seat. It was the last week after Easter break. There's no seats out of South Florida at all. They announced, the first thing they did was announce that there would be nobody getting a seat out of South Florida because you just can't get one on all the airlines. They're all filled up. And you probably will have to be here a couple of days until we can do something about it. And they even announced that they weren't going to put us up in a hotel. There was like all of these negative things coming out of these victimizers who work for the airline. And I watched the people around me. Now, a minute ago, they were worried about whether they were going to be alive. Now, suddenly, they're alive and they're relieved about that. Now they're angry because the plane isn't going to take off or they're going to have a replacement. And so there's all this anger. Now, I believe in looking for solutions, never looking for problems. So when the plane landed, they said, no one can get off the airplane. But I knew they probably weren't talking to me, okay? Because as soon as it landed, the door opened, I went out and called my secretary and said, I have to give a speech tomorrow morning in Chicago, and there's a lot of people depending on me to be there. There's 500 people waiting to hear me speak, and we've set up this date in advance. I see myself in Chicago. I know I'll be there. 191 other people didn't believe they would be in Chicago and acted just that way. They were angry. They were upset. They were yelling at the people. They were letting their blood pressure get out of control, and they weren't doing anything. I said to my secretary, I will call you back in 15 minutes. She was in Fort Lauderdale. I'll call you back collect in 15 minutes. Just make sure I have a seat on a plane, no matter what it costs or what the inconvenience or what it get me a seat. At the moment that she called, somebody the moment before had canceled on another airline a first-class seat. They had just canceled, they weren't going. And I was able to get that seat because the person that she called handled the cancellation, and she just replaced me on there, okay, instead of going through the whole list. And I had a seat on a flight that was 5 hours away. But I still had a seat on a flight to get in much later than I anticipated. And I went down and got my boarding pass, and I was, out of 192 people, there was only one that made it to Chicago. And I was that one, not because I'm smarter than everybody else, or because I know anything that other people don't know, or because I'm better than anyone else. It was because I look for solutions, not for problems, and I refused to be victimized by my need to be right through using anger and being upset and so on. When you are able to visualize yourself doing something, you start acting on that visualization or that image. You're able to make things happen when you're looking for solutions that you can never make happen when you're more preoccupied with being a victim. One of my favorite restaurants is a place called the Balkan Grill. It's right underneath the O'Hare Hilton, right down in the... They serve food from the Balkan countries. I usually eat there when I come in. And the place was empty. It was about 5 minutes to 10, and I hadn't eaten yet. And I went downstairs. The restaurant was completely empty, 5 to 10 on a Saturday. I've never seen that before. It's usually a very busy place. And I had the most remarkable experience. Someone was sent to me. His name was Zia. Z-I-A is his name. And he's from a place in the world where there is no country. Did you know there were places in the world that there are no countries? I didn't either. And he said they won't let them be countries. When too many people start to congregate where he lives and where his father lived and his grandfather, they make them spread out so that there's no governments and nobody to come in and impose how we have to behave and so impose laws on us and rules and so on. That each unit that lives there, sort of their own family unit. And it's a place in the world between Afghanistan and Pakistan, in the mountains. And this man looked like he might have been from Afghanistan or someplace like that. A very heavy, thick accent. And he, for some reason, he just walked over to my table. He was my waiter. And he just began to talk. And he forgot about ordering my food. Forgot to know if I wanted a beer or not. And he just started talking to me. And I was sitting there thinking if I could be recording what he is saying, he could have given the talk today. It was astounding, the things that he was telling me. He told me about his great uncle who died at 72. And one of the words that he said to me was that he was a very young man. And he died at 72, and I thought that's an interesting comment, because a man living to 72 in our country, while 72 isn't thought of as old, it still isn't thought of as young either in our culture. And he said, oh yes, he was very young. He said, my grandfather is still living. He's 111. And his grandmother is living, and she's 107. And his father is a very vibrant, healthy man of about 84 or 85. And when he was talking about his granduncle, well, his uncle was somebody who had left Afghanistan back in the 20s, I guess, and had become a very famous doctor. He'd come over to this country, and he had traveled all over the world, and he had spoken at, he had a practice in London and a practice here in Chicago and a practice in New York, and he was a consultant, and he was going on and on with great, wonderful pride about this uncle of his. And he said when his uncle was dying, and here he is telling me that. I mean, imagine a waiter telling me, this has never happened. I eat out 5-6 nights a week. I've never heard a sermon from a waiter before that was so profound. And it was all like very, very simple truths. He was so full of himself. It was like, what you have to learn how to do sometimes is to really learn what the Japanese call muga, M-U-G-A. I write about it in The Sky's the Limit. Or it's also called Shibumi, which is also the title of a novel, which is a wonderful novel, by the way, I recommend to you. It is this sort of ability that Maslow talked about, of being able to get into a present moment and have a peak experience. and to live it and totally devour only what is in this moment. In the Japanese culture, they use the metaphor of learning how to drink tea from an empty cup, okay? And to experience the tea and to taste it and to have the vision of it and the feel of it and the experience of it and so on. And that's what that moment was like for me last night for about 40 minutes. It was, you ever get those moments when things start going up and down your spine? They call it kvelling in Hebrew. It's sort of an internal kind of joy. And I didn't want it to go away, and I didn't want him to go away. And I didn't want the dinner to stop, and I didn't want anybody else to walk into the restaurant so that he would have to wait on them. After he took my order, he would go, and he would come back, and he would pick up the story exactly in the very spot where he had left it. He never missed a beat. And he talked about when his uncle was dying, and that his own children were in the room, and he knew he was going to die in 30 minutes. He knew that it was his turn, it was his time. And he said that he didn't call in his own children to talk to them because he didn't think they could be truthful or that he could be truthful with them because there was too much of a closeness there. And he had some things that he wanted to say before he checked out. So he called in this Zia, who was his nephew, and he said, I called you in, I just want to share with you and be with you before I leave. He said, you know, I'm a very prominent person, and I've really worked very hard all my life and everything, but he said that I don't know why I did it all. He said that here I am 72, a young man, and I'm getting ready to die, and I know I'm dying. And he said, I worked so hard, and I spent all my time trying to become prominent, and I have lots of acquisitions, and he said, I'm a mountain clansman from the mountains of southern Afghanistan, which is not in Afghanistan. Because I asked him if something happened to somebody who lived there, what country? I kept trying to trick him and say, what country would they put on your passport? He said, there are no passports. He said, there's nothing like that. He said, it is not a country. There is no government. We won't allow that. He kept insisting that was, and so I want to check that out and find out. But he said, I don't know why I did all of those things I did. He said, my whole life I spent, the 72-year-old man, my whole life I spent being consumed with acquisitions and trying to get things and trying to get someplace and trying to make a big difference. And I really didn't put the focus where it really should be at all. It was a very strange, wonderful experience. The truth that he was talking about just really touched me very deeply. I wonder, as I think about what it is that all of us want in our lives and how we're going to get there, so often we make wants and goals and where we're going the most important part of our life. We operate from this premise, and this is probably the most important thing that I've learned when I took up the baton from Maslow. He had said that most people are what we call deficiency motivated, okay? That is, we try to raise our children and we look at ourselves and we say, where would I like to go? What are my goals? How much money can I make? So what we do in order to motivate ourselves is we say that where I am in this moment is somehow deficient, somehow wrong. I have to look at myself and say I'm operating from lack in my life, all right? Now, this is a major, major conflict for people who want to have what I call a no-limit life or live a self-actualized life. You must never start in your life from where you are as being deficient, and I will get to where I want to go by repairing my deficiencies, by improving upon the things that I don't have, okay? See, I don't think it's important to have a goal. I think the big difference between where I am now and where I was 10 years ago is that I believe you have to be. I believe in being, not striving, arriving. You have to be your goal, as it were. You have to not be looking for the truth, you have to be truth. You can't be looking for healing or a healing method out there at all. You have to be truth. And when you are it is never something that eludes you. I just had a great experience. On the 1st of January of this year, I quit drinking caffeine. Okay? I had a bad addiction to not Coca-Cola, but Diet Coke, Tab. I could drink a crowd pleaser. Easy. In a speech, I could. Or Diet Pepsi or one of those things, those big 64 ounces. I was drinking 8 to 10 cans of that stuff a day inadvertently. I mean, I just didn't know. I'd have it for breakfast, I'd have it in the afternoon, and I'd always had one when I was driving, and whenever I'd give a speech, I had one. And my wife had said to me, and everybody who knew me was saying to me, that's the thing that's got you. That's the one that you can't get rid of. You know, you talk about being, and you know it's not good for you. You know how you feel when you drink too much of that stuff. Then I heard a tape by a man named Ram Dass. Ram Dass had a tape about this Buddhist monk who was the son of a Buddhist saint. And this Buddhist saint was a woman, and there's only been like 4 female Buddhist saints ever in the Theravadan Buddhism. And the woman was very upset with her son because he was a narc in Thailand. All right? And in Thailand they have the highest incidence of heroin addiction in the world. The heroin addicts are on the streets everywhere. The woman would say to her son, instead of imprisoning these people, instead of punishing them, instead of putting them in jail, instead of all of these things that you do, why don't you try to help them? Why don't you send them love? Why don't you, as a saint would say, okay? And he said, but I don't know what to do. And she encouraged him to study Theravadan Buddhism, and he did. And this is the most austere of all of the fields of Buddhism. It is the area of Buddhism in which you have to practice like 130 austerities a day, all right? You don't sleep on a mattress, you sleep on the floor, you don't look at anybody of the opposite sex, you don't dance, you watch every single thing that you eat, you say prayers all the time. I mean, a lot of these austerities, physical austerities. Well, he got into it, okay? And he thought that these people were too wild for him, right? So he invented like 30 more austerities of his own. And he was practicing 160 of them a day. And Ram Dass said when he met him, he was like meeting a tree trunk, all right? He was that firm. And what he would do is he would take this truck and he would go through the streets of Bangkok. And he would say to the heroin addicts, if you want to get rid of your addiction in 1 week, 1 week's time, jump on the truck. And we'll take you to the monastery and you'll be rid of it in 1 week, guaranteed. He would get these large numbers of people that would jump on. Every week he would take another batch of these addicts. I mean, and I'm talking heroin, the hardest thing in the world for us to overcome with will. And he would take them there, and the first thing he would say to them was, this is your only chance. This is the only chance that you're going to have in life to be rid of your addiction. And then he would say to them, I am the treatment. I am bigger than the addiction. And I will show you that. And he would take heroin. And he wouldn't have any effect on him at all. He just wouldn't even react to it. His mind, he had trained himself to be bigger than the addiction, and showed them that. And then he would put them through this violent purging, vomiting kind of thing to cleanse out their system and so on. But the thing that he talked about that is the most profound to me is the idea of becoming the treatment, being, the psychology of being. I have taken Maslow's notion of the psychology of being to levels now in my life to challenge myself in areas that I never thought were even possible before. And one of them was with this minor addiction, caffeine, tab. I mean, he would laugh. Tab? You're having trouble with tab? I admit it's not major, okay? But nevertheless, for me, it owned me. And I let it own me for over 20 years, all right? This was the stuff that was, it was my last addiction, if you will. Smoking had been something I hadn't had anything to do with for 25 years. And drinking, no part of it. It doesn't interest me. And putting poisons into my body and all of these kind of things. And keeping myself in shape, no problem. It was this thing that I kept holding on to. So what I did on the 1st of January this year is I re-listened to that tape. And I became the treatment. It's an amazing thing. See, when you take something into your body that you know isn't good for you or that you don't like, or let's say it's a cigarette if that's what you're trying to quit, or if it's alcohol or caffeine or too much sugar or whatever it is, and you consume that, what happens is as that goes through you, it becomes you. You become it. You become one with the poison. And every time you do that, you are the poison. You're not consuming poison. You are not using a method of putting poison into your system. It's not that. That's one step removed from being. Being means you are it, it is you. You are one, you are at unity with the poison. All you have to understand with any addiction that you may have, any kind of an addiction, is that once you become the treatment and you stop being the poison, it's not even a challenge anymore. I mean, it's so easy that it's disgusting to me. I mean, I feel so superior when I walk by a Coca-Cola machine and I see that button that I always used to push. I mean, I just go, but I'm not that anymore. That's not what I am anymore. Not that I've mastered it or that I've got a method that's great that I want to tell you about this method. It's that I am no longer it. It is no longer me. And I am someplace else now. When you get that, when you understand that notion of being and beginning to apply that in your life, I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's like in religion, people are looking for the 10 Commandments. Okay? But in the Bible, it says, live of the truth, doesn't it? The whole idea of the kingdom of heaven, I mean, that's one of the great secrets of the universe that is so simple. I mean, the kingdom of heaven isn't this place that you're going to get to. It is within. It is what you carry around with you. And when you are the 10 Commandments, you don't need them. You don't need any of that. You simply are being that. And when that is you and you are it, you are what Christ called, of the truth. All right? Not looking for it, not trying to get it from someone else, not hoping that someone else can reveal it to you. It is what you are. When you are looking for love, it will always elude you. When you're looking for happiness, it will always elude you. When you become those things, it's just there, and it begins to own you. You don't have it. It has you. It has a hold of you. So the first benefit that I can think of in approaching life from this loving, giving love away and having it for yourself, filling yourself up with it, is that you will see dramatic changes in the negative kinds of lifestyle things that you have accepted as a way of life for you. Smoking becomes something that's almost too easy to give up. It's almost too easy. You don't tell yourself it's difficult. You don't tell yourself that I'm going to go through a lot of pain and that it's going to be a troublesome thing for me and I'm going to go through withdrawal. You simply become a person who no longer wants to poison himself or herself. And looking at cigarettes as something that you're pouring inside of you, this self that you feel so good about, is just impossible after a while. It owns you. This health approach, this wellness approach begins to own you.
Is it partly because you see yourself as being more valuable now?
I don't think it's because you're more valuable. I think it's because it conflicts with who you are now. See, I'm not saying that where you are now is bad. I don't want anybody to look at themselves and saying, these are all my bad habits and I want to eliminate them. That's the least effective way to change anything about yourself, all right? Because you have to quit, and you have to stop, and you have to lose, if it's weight or whatever. Those are all very negative words, all right? When you visualize yourself the way you want to be, and you treat yourself according to that image that you have for yourself, then the rest of it is just natural. It is just the way to go. What you have to do is understand that high-functioning people look at where they are and say, that's fine. It's terrific. Where I am is just perfect. I am one of God's perfect creatures on this planet, a perfect creation. But I can grow. And that's not inconsistent at all. It's very much like looking at the sky and say, what's the sky today? Is it perfect? You say, well, it's the only sky we have. It's blue. It's got a few clouds in it. It's perfect. You look at it an hour later, it's quite different. Still perfect. Things can change, and the perfection doesn't have to change, all right? That may be what perfection is, in fact, as human beings, to recognize ourselves as always changing. I began to look at this concept called mastery, where you become to your own life like a great painter becomes to his creation or her creation, shading it, shaping it, coloring it, putting it in exact tones that you want it to be. So you are creating your own life. I believe that all human beings are geniuses and have mastery or self-actualization, whatever you want to call it, available to them if they want to make the choices that go with it. Goal setting is something that a lot of confusion about. There's nothing wrong with having a goal as long as you don't fall in love with it. And as long as you understand that every step on the way to the achievement of the goal is just as important as every other step, including the one wherein you reach it. That we only get nows, we only get present moments to live. And that to want to be something 5 years from now assumes that you're going to be here then, in this body, in the way that you are living now. And that's a very blatant assumption, that if you always have that 5-year notion, there will come a time when you won't be able to achieve that, because the future is promised to no one, and the past is a canceled check. I mean, it's just gone, right? So that all we have are moments to live.
One of the things that's important to learn how to do is to act as if what you want is already there. To act that way. Not to act as if, maybe if I set all these goals and work real hard at them. You see, when I said that success is an inner concept, so is happiness, so is love, so is approval. If you think that you're going to find fulfillment if you set a goal out there, and then you work real hard for that goal, and when you get there, you'll finally have it, your life is all this striving. What you need is a psychology of arriving. Not striving. You know, you're thinking about what I'm going to do and I'm going to get here. Meantime, every one of these days are your life. This is all you get. So the goals, while there's nothing wrong with goals at all, it's like every step along the way is just as important to savor as arriving here. And if you're only goal-oriented and only striving, you're only about halfway up the ladder of no-limit people. You are always going to suffer from the disease of more. If you only have goals to arrive at in the future. Because this becomes your life, this striving. And when you get here, you don't know what to do with this. You don't know how to handle what you've got. So then you upgrade your goal. You say, all right, I'll have 200,000 in the bank instead of 100,000. And now your life becomes more struggling, more suffering, more trying to get there. And you get here, and then all of a sudden you look around and you're an old person. And you say, what happened to my life?
Not becoming. There's nothing in the world wrong with pursuing anything as long as you stay consistent with the truth. The truth is the most important thing you can have in your life. If you become a person, if you want anything to work on in your life, work on this. Everything that comes out of your mouth, every word that comes out of your mouth is exactly as it is and exactly as you are. That's a wonderful place to try to get to. All right? Now that can be construed as a goal, all right, in the goal-setting sense. But each time that you slip doesn't mean you're less than valuable, that you're unimportant. It doesn't mean that at all. It simply means that you have something to learn from slipping. And so in this moment, appreciate what you have to learn from slipping rather than saying, I shouldn't have and I failed and that makes me bad and now I'm deficient and so on. You see, the more you operate from goal setting in the sense of repairing deficiencies, the more your life becomes one of striving. Your life becomes a striving. And when you and when you arrive at the place where you want it to be, you don't know how to be there because your whole life has been striving. If it's a week from Thursday, you're looking toward whatever it is, that party or the bank account that you're going to now have the amount of money that you wanted in it, and you finally get there after all the struggling, and then Thursday arrives, you don't know how to deal with that because your whole life has been in anticipation of. And so when you get there, you suffer from this disease called more. And I've got to get more of that.
There's a lot of people out there, many of you, who, while you're having your first cup of coffee, are thinking about the second cup. Or while you're having your appetizer, are wondering if you're going to be able to get a dessert. And all of this stuff called appetizer and your main course and all of that is something you just sort of forget about, don't experience, in anticipation of what it's going to be in the next moment and the next moment. Now, the highest form of sanity that's out there and available for all of us is this present moment, the now, and making a peak experience, being able to make a peak experience out of a present moment, out of any present moment. Now, I read a book called The Idiot one time.
by Fyodor Dostoevsky. All right? Dostoevsky lived in the 1860s in Russia under the Tsar. Now here's what happened to Dostoevsky. It's a true story. He was accused of being in alliance with a literary group of people in the Soviet Union in Moscow who were attempting to overthrow the Tsar by talking about subversive ideas like freedom and people have a right to think for themselves and make choices and all the kinds of things that I've written about, for which I would have been executed many, many times over in most countries of the world. Well, Dostoevsky was a member of a small group. The Tsar said that he was a member. This was long before he was well known. This is when he was a young man. Right? He was sentenced to die, and he was put into a cell in Moscow. And in that cell, he knew that he was going to be dying, and he had been told the date. He was going to be shot by a firing squad. And so they took 5 of them out, and they lined them up, and they put them in a stake. And they took a black shroud, and they wrapped it around each one of these 5 people's eyes. And the Tsar's guards shot the first man and killed him, and he got to watch that and witness that. Then they put the shroud around him, and they shot him. And he was next. He was the next man in line to die. Dostoevsky, the writer of Crime and Punishment, some of the greatest books ever written, okay? And he was pardoned by the Tsar at the last moment and assigned to 10 years in prison at hard labor. And for some reason, he was spared at that moment, and the other 2 were also spared. Now that's a true story. Dostoevsky, in writing in The Idiot, talks about the value of the present moment and learning how to get consumed in it. And when he saw a cockroach in his cell where he had been condemned to die, and he saw, it wasn't an annoyance. It wasn't some creature that was filthy that he didn't want. It was a miracle. Now, a lot of people...
The old saying is that life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. And you must understand that every moment in your life is a miracle to be lived. That you must stop looking for miracles in something in the future. And that not falling in love with your plan means that if you want to get someplace terrific, enjoy every step along the way. And then if you want to alter that, let's say you want to be a physician. You're young and you go to school and you want and all that, and then you realize, no, I don't think I want to go to medical school. That doesn't have to be a horrendous kind of letdown or a failure of some kind. You simply say, I think I'll move in this direction now. I'm moving. And every day you have to live fully, rather than suffering or postponing your gratification or postponing your purpose in the pursuit of something in the future which may or may not arrive for you, and if it does, you'll very likely be a completely different person anyway. That's one of the hard things to understand. Heraclitus said, there's nothing permanent but change. Change is the only thing there always is, including all of us all the time. So if you set a goal for yourself for a long time, you have to understand that you're going to be very, very different from the person that you are now. I had a good friend who was an internist, and he was in his 40s, and he said to me, it's this practice that's just getting to me. I'm owned by it, I'm making a lot of money and all that, but I don't want to do this. I want to be a sportscaster. And he wanted to broadcast, and he wanted to practice on high school teams, and he'd always wanted to give that a try where he could be his own boss and not be a slave to it and all that. I said, well, why are you pursuing this? You're a physician and all that, but why would you want to continue doing that? He said, well, I decided a long time ago that I was going to be a physician, and that I can't change that now. I'm a doctor. And I said, who decided that you were going to be a physician? He said, well, I was 18 years old and I made that decision. I said, would you go to an 18-year-old today to get vocational guidance for where you should be going in your life? Would you consult a teenager for that? He said, well, of course not. I said, well, isn't that what you're doing? If you're not happy and not being fulfilled in what you're doing in this moment, you have the option to change that. And you don't have to be attached to what you've been. What you've been is just the choices that you made then. And if you don't want to make those choices now, and I can hear a collective rumbling in America as I say that, which is, yes, but I have responsibilities. Yes, but I have a mortgage. Yes, but, and there's a lot of those yes, buts. And I say to you that if you have always been responsible and paid your bills, then that is who you are, and that's what you ought to consult, rather than someone who is telling yourself that a disaster is on the way if you make a choice to be something that you never dreamt you could be. When I left the professorship, and I left an opportunity to have tenure for the rest of my life and a lot of external kind of security, and resigned, and went across the country to talk about erroneous zones back in 1976. Everyone told me how insane that I was. But I've never listened to what everyone else said, because you have to listen to who you are. And I knew that no matter what, my inner voices told me this is what I have to do, and you can't stop someone who knows they have to do it from doing it. The irony of that is that I made more money, and I never even tried to. I never thought I'd make money writing, because I had already written a whole lot of books that didn't make any money, textbooks and so on. And writing was just something that I am. And it wasn't anything I could quit, stop. I didn't want to. I loved it. I felt fulfilled and so on when I wrote. And I knew that I was leaving footprints and all of those things. The irony is that after I finally resigned and did what I wanted to do, I made more money in the first year that I went out and did what I really believed in and loved than I had made the entire 35 years previously of my life, my whole life. In 1 year, I made more money. And that isn't because I was lucky. That isn't because I'm Wayne Dyer and I had any opportunity. I didn't have any more opportunity than anybody else. In fact, I had less. I came from complete poverty and many years in foster homes and orphanages and having to earn my own way through everything. Wasn't that at all. It was when you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and you go out there to live the life that you have imagined, success will chase you and arrive in your life in external forms in an amount sufficient to take care of your needs. It will happen for you. As long as you stay there and tell yourself you've got to continue to do something, you've always done it because you've always done it, then the only payoff you get for that is to defend your misery. It's like arguing for your limitations. The only thing you get are your limitations. And the people who love you, care about you, your family and so on, will support you consulting your inner voices and your inner signals and doing what it is that you know you have to do. And if you picture yourself being successful at it, and you know that it's going to work, and you won't let any other image into you, it will get stored away within you exactly the same as if you were out working on it. And if you guide yourself by that image and just won't let that image out, you can't not make it happen. You can't. It's that law of the universe, because an image gets stored away the same as an experience. And every obstacle you just see as an opportunity to see what I've got to do to shift and to do it. Meantime, you're feeling purposeful and you're being purposeful. You're no longer looking for a purpose, you are your purpose.
It seems that we're smart to pursue an idea of something we want to accomplish, something we want to be very much, even though it may be risky, even though we may be taking chances, risking failure, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And we need to do that even though we cannot see how we're going to succeed yet. Even though the whole distance may still be hidden, we still need to try. We still need to encourage ourselves to try.
You just need to do. That's the key word, to do. Even trying is a myth. Without being nitpicking, you can't try anything. If I say to you, there's this pen sitting on this table in front of us, and I say to you, all right, what I want you to do is try to pick up this pen. Now, here we go, okay? Now, in reality, all of this trying is called not picking up the pen. It's just not up yet. And then when I do this and I pick it up, there's the pen up in the air. The trying is man's invention. It's the doing. It's the doing that is important. And yes, risk-taking is phenomenal. And I use the word myself. I have in a chapter in my book on raising children called I Want Them to Become Risk-Takers. And yet I don't believe it's risky at all. I believe the risk is only our evaluation of it. And that the real risk, other than putting your life in jeopardy and jumping in front of a moving train and foolish things like that, which I'm not talking about here, the risk is, there's several. One is that I will fail. All right, let's look at that. You can't succeed unless you're willing to fail. And you can't always be better than everybody else, because if you're a winner by having to defeat everybody else, then you'll always be a loser, because no one can always defeat everybody else, no matter how great they are. So that's not a good definition of winning at all. I've often talked about Babe Ruth hitting 60 home runs in 1927, the year he struck out more than anybody in the history of baseball, the same year. If you want to hit home runs, you have to be willing to strike out. And failing at something is just an opportunity, if you're looking at it the way I'm talking about. It's just an opportunity to see where you are and to assess who you are. And if you're having to look over your shoulder at somebody else to decide how you're doing, then somebody else's performance is determining who you are and how well you're doing. That's called competition. Enlightened people don't look at other people to determine where they are. They say that's the person and that's how they're running and that's where they are in their music development or whatever it is. And that has nothing to do with me. Where I am is how I decide to believe. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting out there and competing in a tennis match or in a golf match or in bowling or in anything in life. But to understand that it's not to evaluate who you are and how valuable you are, but just to see how you stack up to somebody else. That's fine. And when it's over, it's over. That's one big risk. And when you get to a point where failure is something you welcome, because that's how you learn. You don't learn much from success except to stay the same. But when you fail at something, it's a wonderful experience because it gives you an opportunity to grow. To me, that's not risky at all, even though to many people it is, this whole business of failing. The other fear is that I won't be liked, or that somebody won't approve of me. Well, the enlightened people are independent of the good opinion of other people. They are not functioning and running their life based on what others think or say or tell them to do, but instead on what my own inner lights tell me to do, with the morality of as long as I'm not hurting anybody else or interfering with anyone else's right to run their life as they choose, then anything that I do is okay. That's all morality is. Your right to swing your fist and flail around stops with my right to have my nose shaped the way I want it to be shaped. That's it. And so that's the only morality there is. And so you go out into the world and you are who you choose to be. And you know that some people will like it and some people won't. And the people who love you the most will probably dislike what you do the most, 50% of the time. And if you're trying to run your life based on what everybody else is saying or thinking or feeling, then you can never get anything done, because there's always going to be somebody, a large number of somebodies, who are going to dislike it. And every great idea comes from an innovator. And innovators are people who do things differently. They're not trying to please everybody else. Because when you think about it, if you try to please everyone else, if you try to be just like everyone else, what do you have to offer? If you're just like everyone else, you just have sameness to offer. It's your uniqueness. After a while, you begin to say that's just okay. And in fact, even in my own relationship with my wife, if we have disagreements now, there was a time if she would disagree with something that I would believe, I would be upset about that. Not immobilized or anything, but like, how could you not agree with who? Now, if we talk and she disagrees with it, I just say, that's her. That's who she is. That's what she believes. And she doesn't understand me, and that's okay. The greatest understanding you can have if you want to be enlightened is that no one will ever understand you because you're unique. You're special. You are a unique creation, and no one can ever get behind your eyeballs and see things as you do. You are always alone with who you are, and yet never lonely if you like the person you're alone with. So those risks stop being risks after a while. They're only risks to people who are just starting out on the path, who are just beginning to find out how easy all of this is and how perfect it all is. And the further along you go, the less risk there is. It just doesn't matter anymore, whether you fail or whether somebody doesn't like it or whether or not it fits in. Those things just don't matter anymore. And they become less and less and less risky and just easier and easier and easier to just be what you know you have to be.
I believe that success is an inner concept. Inner concept. It is something that is part of your own inner development. When you have it inside of you, and you cultivate that, and that's what I want to try to help parents to do with their children. When you carry that around inside of you, you bring it to every single thing that you do in life. Everything that you do. You bring it to your children. You don't get it from raising them the right way. You don't get it by closing the deal. You bring it to every aspect of the deal. You don't get it by focusing on your commission and how much am I going to get, and if I divide this and if I do that, and always being concerned with your own quotas. You get it by forgetting about your quotas and focusing on your customers. You forget about you and all the things that you're going to get out of what you're doing in life as a happy, contented, fully functioning, no-limit human being. You simply go out and advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavor to live your own kind of life the way you choose, making every day a miracle, and success will chase after you and arrive in your life in amounts greater than you ever anticipated in any present moment of your life. There's an old parable, and the old parable goes like this. There's an old cat, and there's a little kitten out in the alley. And a little kitten is chasing its tail. You ever see a little kitten do that? They chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. And the old cat comes up to him and stops him and says, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Well, I've been to cat philosophy school. I've been studying cat philosophy. And I've discovered that there are two things in the world that are important for a cat. One is that happiness is the most important thing for a cat. And two, that happiness is located in your tail." So what I've figured out is that if I chase it and chase it and chase it, and I finally get a hold of it and get it in my mouth, I will have a lock on eternal happiness. And the old cat said, "You know, I haven't had the opportunities to go to cat philosophy school like you. I've kind of wandered around the alleys all my life." He said, "You know, it's really amazing. I've learned the same things you have. I've learned that the most important thing for a cat is happiness, and indeed, that it is located in my tail." He said, "The only difference between you and I," he said, "I've discovered, is that if you go about your business and do the things that are important to you, it'll follow after you wherever you go." Isn't that a nice parable? It's an interesting notion. I use the analogy of the bag boys. There are one-baggers and two-baggers in the world. The one-bagger is the bag boy in the store who, when he's bagging your groceries, he's sort of tired and he's sort of got a real bad attitude about what he's doing, and he's only getting a few dollars an hour, and he picks up a loaf of bread and puts it on the bottom and put a few tomatoes down there to keep it nice so that the bread and tomatoes mix nice when the can of grapefruit juice goes on top of it or whatever. And he doesn't give a damn. And he's slow. And his attitude is that there's no one cashier in the world that I cannot make stop and help me bag an order, even if they've only got one item. All right? That's his philosophy. And he kind of goes and does that. Now, you look at that and you say, well, maybe it's just because he's bagging groceries. That's what it is. But it's not. You see, because right in the same store, there's somebody else making the same money, who's got the same benefits, who is like a double bagger, and his philosophy is there's no two cashiers in the world that I cannot keep up with. They'll never have to touch a bag. And then there are a few that are triple baggers. I used to be a triple bagger. I worked for Kroger's through my master's bagging groceries. That's what I got through it and paid for it. I used to make a contest and see if I could get 3 cashiers and bag for all 3 of them and say something pleasant to them and have fun. And the hour would go by like that, and the people would always want to come to my lines, and there was that kind of a fun thing. I looked forward to doing it. Now, the one-baggers, 5 years later, they get passed over for a job promotion for manager of a store if they're still there. And they go home and they tell their wife that shouldn't have happened. They passed me over. They're prejudiced. They don't like me because I'm too tall, or I'm too short, or I'm the wrong color, or I'm the wrong size, or I'm a female, or I'm a male, or whatever it is. They've got their reasons, you see. And they go through their whole lives being single baggers. Even up into their retirement years, they're still making excuses and finding fault and blaming the rest of the world for what is. And the double bagger owns a chain of Kroger stores. There's an old saying in management, and this is something for you to really remember. Don't send your ducks to Eagle School, okay? Now think about that. We got a lot of ducks in the world, and there's just very few eagles. And trying to get a duck to become an eagle is one of the toughest jobs you'll run into in life. There's ducks everywhere. And there are very, very few eagles who are willing to soar. See, ducks sort of think in duck-like ways. And when you try to train them to be an eagle, they just don't seem to get the message. They have this impossibility kind of thinking. They have this notion that we've always done things this way, that this is the book, this is the way we do it. Just flying over here yesterday from Miami, I noticed that on the flight there was a flight attendant, and the drinks, they were like 18 rows behind. They served the meal, and then way, way, way up at the front was this cart, and you knew the way they were going that the cart wasn't going to get to the meals until the meal was done. And I like to have something to drink while I'm eating, as most people do. And I just said to my daughter sitting next to me, and why do they only take one order at a time? I mean, why, when the 6 people sitting across, it was a 727-3, and the girl would say, "What would you like?" And she would then take that, and then she would take the ice, and she would put it in there, and then she would pour it, and then she would hand it to her. Then she'd say to the next person in the middle, "What would you like?" And she would do that for 6 people. Now, I mean, an eagle would just say, "All right, what do you 6 people want?" All right? Wouldn't you? But the book isn't that way. For some reason, the book isn't done that way. I mean, an eagle would have been right with the food trays all the time. The ducks just, if you get there, you get there. I mean, if it happens, it happens. If you get something to drink an hour after the flight is over and you're getting your bag, oh, by the way, here's your juice that you wanted. And you see, when you talk to those people, when you talk to ducks, you get duck quack, quack, quack talk a lot. I mean, at a bank not too long ago, I was talking to a teller, and the teller was on hold. She had somebody on just this sort of like terminal hold. I mean, she'd been there for a long time on this hold, you know. And I was the next person in line, and I just simply said to her, "Could you just make this deposit? I just want to deposit this check, and I want to get out of here." "Sir, I can only do one thing at a time." I go, whack, 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 whack. Whack, whack, whack. I said, "Only one? I could do 10 things at a time." If you want to be an eagle, you got to be looking for the mice down here. You got to be looking out for telephone poles. You got to be thinking about your little eaglets. I mean, you got a million things you got to do at once. I mean, who among you can only do one thing at a time? No parent out there can ever do only one thing at a time. You'd never get anything done, ever, in your life. The little ones, you have to learn how to read a book and watch them swimming and still, be able to make your dinner that night. I mean, you just learn how to do that when you're effective. Or you just sit around and say, "I can only do one thing at a time." And there's this one thing at a time mentality. There's this duck-like mentality that you run into all the time. And see, I was used to it because even in the orphanage, I mean, our whole room was just one great big duck pond, all right? It was. I mean, the teacher would get up and say to all the other kids, "This is the worst class I've ever had in my life. I just can't stand it." And 4 or 5 of those kids would walk out of there feeling guilty, and I'd say to them, "This is the worst class you ever had? Her life must be great." We're so easy, Why are you falling into this guilt pattern? Why are you letting this teacher? And sure enough, they'd just go home and they'd feel bad and manipulated with that kind of stuff. Well, I was running into this kind of mentality everywhere. Last Friday, I spoke up in Orlando, and they put me in this beautiful Marriott hotel at the airport there. It's a wonderful hotel. And they put me on the 9th floor. It's called the concierge level, They have a concierge. And this concierge sort of takes care of you. They give you little appetizers, and they give you a little juice, and a little bar there, and they charge you $100 more a night, all right? But they hire people to be these concierges. Now, it's not a great job, but it's not a bad job. So the first night that I was there, they had appetizers, and I went out, and appetizers went from 7 to 9, hot appetizers. Well, I didn't finish running until about 10 after 9. I went in, I said, I'd like to take some appetizers back. And the guy said, "No problem, I'll get you some." He said, "They close at 9, but I know a guy downstairs in the kitchen, and I'll go down and I'll bring some up, and would you like a beer?" I said, "Yeah, cold beer would really be great." And he said, "They've got some real nice little chocolate-like things for dessert, little eclairs, and would you like a coffee?" I said, "That'd be great." This guy had no idea who I was or anything like that. And he went out of his way after the time, and all right, that was terrific. All right? The next morning, they have a continental breakfast on the same floor. And so you're supposed to be through with breakfast by 9:30. So I went out there about 10:15 or whatever it was. And I said, I know that you're closed. There was somebody else there. There was a duck there, okay? They replaced the eagle with the duck. And the duck said, wah, wah, wah. Sir, continental breakfast closes at 9:30. It's 10:15. I'm sorry. I said, I know that. I understand. But I said, I just like some orange juice. I'm really thirsty. I've just finished running. I've got to give a talk this afternoon. And she said, sir, 9:30. It says it very clearly. I'm the guy paying $125 a night for the concierge, and she's dismissing me. You see the difference? The difference is like, it's an attitude. It's what one person believes. Now, I can assure you, if you follow through on these two concierges, that you're going to see that ego soaring all through his life. And this other person is going to go from that job to probably one a little more demeaning and a little more demeaning, and is always going to be wondering why. And if you're looking for people, if you're ever in employment and looking for ways of recruiting people and so on, I'd say great employees are found. They're not trained. They're found. You go out there and you find those people who have that, and then you can help them to do anything and to be anything when they've got that inner attitude. Not too long ago, I was at the airport in O'Hare. I've got to tell you this story. It was at Delta Airlines. They're usually a terrific airline. They practice teaching people attitudes more than anything. And I was going to get on a flight in the afternoon to fly down to Fort Lauderdale. They canceled my flight. Now, I said to the fellow, well, that's okay, because I know you have a flight 45 minutes from now, and it goes to West Palm Beach. And that's only 20 miles away, they had 90 empty seats on it. I said, you can just put me on that flight, and I'll fly down. And he looked in the computer. He said, I'm sorry, we can't do that. I said, why not? He said, because the computer says that those are two separate cities. Miami and Fort Lauderdale are considered the same city, but Fort Lauderdale and West Palm are considered different cities. And he said it would be just the same as if you asked if you could go to San Francisco. I mean, it's just a different city as far as the computer's concerned. We can't do that. I'm sorry, you'll have to take a flight 4 hours from now, and we've got you covered, and you'll be on that flight. I said, you mean you canceled the flight? And you won't let me get on a flight that's 20 miles from the airport that I want onto because the computer says it's a separate city? He said, that's right, I'm sorry, there's just nothing else I can do. Now, you've heard this. You all hear this. I said, as I usually do, I'd like to just talk to somebody else. Anybody else. He said, I'm sorry, sir. He said, whoever I bring out, if you want to see a supervisor, he's so used to this, a supervisor, that if I bring out a supervisor, they're just going to tell you the same thing. And he went behind the doors. I said, wait, don't go behind those doors. You know the doors they go behind? You know what's the back of the doors? Duck pond. There's a duck pond back there. There is. He was going to bring out another duck. I said, don't go upstairs. Just go up some stairs. Any stairs, and see if you can find an eagle. He said, what? The hell are you talking about? I said, anybody you bring out, I don't care who it is, bring out somebody who doesn't already believe it can't be done. That's the only kind of person I want. I don't want a guarantee or anything like that. I don't want that. I just want to talk to a human being who doesn't believe it can't be done. And they did. They sent me out an eagle, and I got the flight that I wanted, and everything worked out just the way it was supposed to work out. You must understand that the world is full of those kind of single baggers. And you have to really watch out that you don't become one yourself.
Now, I want to tell you, success, again, is an inner process. When you have it inside of you, you're not looking for it. And consequently, you bring success to everything that you do. I've never believed that people who work real hard and do all the right things make a lot of money and then become successful. I think it's the other way around. I think successful people make a lot of money at whatever they do and make a lot of friends and all of that, because the successful person is someone who has it within them, and they bring it to all these different things. And so they're never looking for it, and they're not surprised at how well they do at virtually everything. When I go down to my mailbox and there's not a check in the mail from someplace for me, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that something didn't come into me that day. Whereas I used to be surprised when every once in a while a check would come into my life. And I never care whether checks come into my life. It just doesn't make any difference. I don't focus on money and trying to get it. I focus more on what I'm doing and what I believe in and my mission, and I live that, and all the other stuff gets taken care of. It all just gets taken care of. And it's all so perfect if we only stop to realize that it is. Right now, as you're driving or listening or wherever you are, and you think about all the people in your life you have any conflict with, all of them, all right? If it's your mother about something that happened when you were 2, if it's your neighbor, if it's your boyfriend or your wife or anybody, just kind of list them in your mind from the people that you hate the most, that you have the most trouble with, down to the ones who just annoy you. And you find out who all these people are, and you send them all love. All right? See, it's easy to send love to the people who smell good. It's easy to send love to the people who do the things you're supposed to do and who are nice to you. All right? That's not a test of love. When Christ was on the cross and someone threw a spear into his rib, his reaction was, forgive them. You know, they don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. And when I tell people that who claim to be Christians, and then they tell me who they hate and who they don't, I say, you are a Christian because that is the title that you have placed on yourself, but you're not Christ-like. I mean, and that's the test. Be Christ-like. Don't be a Christian. That's an easy thing to do. Be part of the orthodoxy. Anybody can do that. Just call themselves that and go to church on Sunday. How do you think? All right? Now, you take and you do that, and you send that out, and every time you get hate in your life or anything, you practice sending out love to that person. Even if it's somebody who's being nasty to you on an airplane or somebody at a bakery who's stepping ahead of you or whatever. And you practice letting people in on the freeway and getting the hate out, the anguish out, the wanting to get ahead of somebody else, the wanting to prove you're better than somebody else. And you make that a way of life, okay? So that means you're filled up with love and you're giving love away. Then love starts coming back into your life and you become free because it's like that hate that you harbor inside of you is a poison that's worse than a cancer, and it's worse than any alcohol. It never goes away. It just continues to eat at you. And until you are able to do that, you can't experience no-limit living or self-actualization or whatever you want to call it. I have to do this in my own life. I do it all the time. I had someone who was suing me, and they wanted to just take advantage of the position that I'm in life and to make some money off of it. And for 2 years, even as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, I was still mad about that and mad at this person. How could they do that? And who was this attorney that took this case? And how dare they? And I fought it and all of that. And all I got out of it was being right, a big legal bill, and months of anguish and pain. Then when I took this person and I began to send this person love and say that this is just what they want to do. See, that's the test, and that's the difference between East and West. In the East, they say that's a test for you. That's to see what you're made out of. There's a blessing in there. Try to find the blessing in that pain and stop telling yourself that it shouldn't be happening. It is. And I started doing that, and in a month's time, the lawsuit was dropped. I started being much more productive. My writing improved. My complexion improved. I began to feel better as a human being. I could walk down the beach, and my secretary said, you have a lilt almost to you. It's like you're almost walking on air when all of that stuff was finally sent away. I have people who owe me money who haven't paid it back over the years. And you think about that, and you start getting really mad. How dare this person? I lent them money, and that's stealing, and they're taking my money, and they said they would. I send them copies of my books now. And I've dropped the loan. I've forgotten about them. I don't need the money. I don't believe in not paying your bills back. I pay them as soon as they come in. But some people are in a place where that's where they have to be still. I don't want to be owned by their behavior. If I'm upset because they refuse to pay money back to me, their refusal to pay money back to me is the source of my upset. I'm allowing somebody else's behavior, which is anathema to me, to control my life at this moment. I don't want that. I don't want to do that. How can I stop from doing that? Only one way: forgiveness. You got to forgive it. You got to let it go. You don't have to forget. You just have to let it go. You don't have to call them up and tell them. You don't have to send them flowers or books if that's not what you want to do. You have to let it go. And when you let it go, that's called non-attachment. You are no longer attached to it. And when you're not attached to it, then you're free to be the creative genius that you are. And until you do that, you have to do that with everyone in your life. That's a principle that works so magnificently. I'll give you another good example. I had dinner Friday night with a man who was going through a horrible divorce. Horrible divorce. He's an attorney, and his wife wants half of his law practice, and she wants the children, and she wants all of his money, and apparently she had an affair, and then he found out, and they had this beautiful marriage, and now they're just going through all this hatred. And he was sitting across from me at this beautiful restaurant down in Fort Lauderdale that we go to. And you could see the tears in his eyes. You could see the anguish in him. You could see that he had aged. This had been going on for 3 or 4 months. He had aged 10 years in 3 or 4 months, full of pain. And he wanted to spend the whole night telling me how right he was and how wrong she was. And he kept telling me that she had no right to do this, and how dare she treat me this way, and you know that she even left letters there, and she was seeing him, and she actually brought this man over to my own home. And he said, so what do you think? I said, you need to be right, don't you? And he said, well, I don't need to be right. What do you think of that? I mean, does she have a right to do any of that? I said, yes. What do you mean, yes? I said, she did it. You can't undo what she's done. Well, he said, what do you think I should do? I said, I think you should forgive her. He said, I already did that. I already told her that, and she didn't. I said, no, I don't have to tell her anything to forgive her. I think you should just let it go. What are you defending? You look 10 years older than you did 4 months ago. You're so racked with pain that you can hardly get up in the morning, and your practice is all going to hell. You are depressed. Your blood pressure is going up. You're not eating. You're losing weight much too quickly. And you're suffering. And you're suffering because you're not willing to forgive her. And I said, it has nothing to do with her. I said, this is your test. And I wish I could get inside your head and let you know that until you are willing to send her love for having behaved in a way that you find so horrendous, that until you're able to do that, I said, eventually you'll do it, because otherwise you won't survive. The organism cannot survive. Obviously, you're killing yourself right now. It's just a slower process. It's going to take a little while. And until you stop killing yourself, that sooner or later you're going to have to do it, so why not choose sooner and just forgive her? You don't have to remarry her. And he said, well, what about the money and all that? I said, how much does she want? And he listed it. I said, give her that and a little more. He said, what? I said, just give her more. You'll get it back. You will. It'll come back to you. Give her more. Well, and I said, and pay it in advance. Give her the money in advance. Let her know that you are not interested in being married, if that's what it is, and that's fine, but that you're not going to carry this around. And practice it, and practice it. You will find a serenity and a beauty and a peace in your life that you never thought could be there before. You never believed that it could be there. And it's right there. It's right there for you. All you have to do is forgive. All you have to do is understand that she's a human being and she made a mistake. You haven't. You haven't made a mistake because she got caught and you haven't, or whatever. It's like, let all of that go. And you will find so much enrichment in your life, because now you won't be using up your present moments to convince yourself how right you are. It won't be important anymore. Being right is not necessary any longer. Just being happy is. And one of the great secrets of the universe is that there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. You must carry that around inside of you.
When you say forgiveness, you're not talking about the attitude that is, I see this person who has wronged me, he's hurt me, I will overlook that. That's not what you're talking about. It isn't the perception that the other person has hurt me.
No, see, first of all, the perception you have to get is that if I'm hurt, I'm hurting myself because I'm in charge of me. Nobody else is. And my hurts are coming from my telling myself that she had no right to do this or shouldn't have done it or was wrong in doing it. And in fact, that's meaningless because the world is the way it is, independent of your opinion about it. Right? And everything that's happened has happened and can't be unhappened just because you wish it were so. That's number one. Number two is all I'm saying about forgiveness is that you become non-attached to your pain, to your anguish. You detach yourself from it. You say, that isn't mine, because you won't be at peace until you do it. You carry it around, and every bit of it that you carry around will destroy you a little bit more, and it'll just take time off of your life. So I'm not saying you forget and pretend, oh, this didn't happen. You become unattached to it.
There's an analogy on the physical side when we experience pain that tells us we're making a mistake someplace. We've done something wrong. On the emotional side, emotional pain is also sending us a signal. It's telling us we're making a mistake. We're doing something wrong. If you're experiencing some uncomfortable feeling, notice it's trying to teach you something. There is an adjustment that needs to be made. What is it? Not to look at the problem, but to see in it what the lesson is, and to not be attached to wanting to be right rather than feel at peace.
That needing to be right is a big one, isn't it? We get so consumed with that in our lives. I know people who just go to great lengths to prove how right they are. They'll even die. That happened at O'Hare Airport not too long ago. I was running out at the airport, and in the parking lot, they had only 2 exit gates to let all the cars out, and one of them didn't have an employee, so there was only 1 gate. Now, many of the people had been waiting as long as an hour and a half to get out of the lot. An hour and a half, 90 minutes, all right? And the computer that controls this arm wasn't working, so they were just letting people sit there and sit there. Now, they could move it up manually by hand. And many of these people had flown to Chicago and were here for business, one kind or another, and they couldn't get out, and their frustration level was getting higher and higher. So finally, a group of them came over, and they started getting out of the cars and walking up to find out what was going on after 90 minutes of this. And they said, look, we're just going to lift the arm. You're going to have to forget about the computer and all of your reasons for keeping us victimized, and if you want us to pay, pay, but tell us what it is. We're going to get out of here. And the guard in there said, no, you can't do that, because then our records will be off. And the records became more important than all these people that they were supposed to be serving there. And when they started to lift the gate and a car went through, the guy jumped in front of the car. He was willing to die to be right, even though his rightness was abusing all of these people. I mean, the system is designed to serve people, not to abuse them. And even though it was doing that, he would rather see them abused. And it was so important for him to be right that he would have died in the process if he had to. You talked about the emotional pain and so on. I went through some real tough emotional problems going through divorce in my life and in relationship with my wife and all of that. And I was getting signals, as you mentioned. The signals were that I was destroying myself, that it was very painful and difficult. I continued to be victimized and right all the time. And you're right, you have to learn how to see the blessing or the gift or the opportunity in these things that are occurring in your life. You must be able to see that and to say, what can I get out of this? And to understand that you have the ability to think what you want to about the things that are going on in your life. You don't have to think in, oh yeah, I'll show you terms, or I'm going to be right and I'm going to beat you down no matter what, or you had no right to treat me that way, or whatever. You don't have to think that way. You have many other options. If someone says something to you that is nasty, one option is to get angry and upset, another is to ignore it, or to say that's just their opinion, or that's just where they are right now. This is just called a process of enlightenment. That's what it is. It's just becoming enlightened. Because enlightenment is really becoming unattached, the process of forgiving, imaging yourself the way you want to, until it becomes a habit. You see, healthy thinking is a habit. Just like neurotic thinking is a habit. It's just habit that you've been practicing for a long, long time. After you start practicing the kind of behaviors that I'm talking about here today, they become natural after a while. Very much like the not taking a cigarette and the not taking the caffeine and watching the amount of sugar that goes into your system and nutrition and vitamins and running and exercising and all of the things that we know are good for us. They become habitual. When we do them enough and practice them enough, they just become a way of life until you get to the point where they own you, because that's what you are, okay? When I say it owns you, that means that you are being it. The same thing applies to changing a bad habit to a good habit. People think, well, it's not going to last. That's easy. That sounds nice, and I will forgive everybody and all of that, but it won't last. When I see things that used to upset me, I wonder how I ever got upset at those things any longer. I wonder that. I heard people arguing this morning. I was staying up at the hotel, and I heard the screaming and hollering going down below the hotel, and this hate being hurled back and forth over, I think it was a scratch in the door of a car, and they were ready to shoot each other, and they were ready to kill each other, and the horrible things they were saying to each other. And I thought, I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't know how to, because I don't have that kind of stuff inside of me anymore. I wouldn't get myself to the place where it would destroy me. And the process of enlightenment is really the process of gradually practicing new ways of thinking, new ways of reacting, sending out more love, until you just get to a point where you see the folly in all of it. You see the folly in all of the anger, and all of the hate, and all of the depression. And you see it all as within your capabilities. And you can almost soar through life. You go with the flow, which is a cute little saying, but you go with it so much that you stop fighting the river. You stop trying to fight the currents and reverse them. And you go with it so well that you're overlooking so much. You're letting all of that go by you. And it becomes a very natural, wonderful process that if we do it with ourselves, and we do it with enough people, and we do it with enough children, we'll transform the whole world. It's called consciousness. It's called being conscious.
Isn't it great that we can achieve the level of mastery that you're talking about, the level of peace and fulfillment, without needing the world to change first,
Yeah.
or without needing other people to conform to our ideas of what they ought to be?
Yeah.
We do control it, don't we?
Everything you need to be completely enlightened, you already have. And it's only when you let go of what owns you, just let go of it. And all you have to do is let go. I'll think of a good image, and the image is, think of a prison cell, all right, and a bars. Think of yourself as standing in front of prison bars and holding on, saying, let me out, and then you look around, and to the left, it's all open space, and to the right, it's all open space, and you turn around, you're looking back of you, and it's all open space back there. And all you're doing, because of your tunnel vision, and you're only looking straight ahead at the only way you know how to do it, you're imprisoned by bars and a cell that is open. All you have to do is walk around it. And all of those entrapments and that cell that you are living in, just look to the left and look to the right and looking back of you. It's wide open. It's wide open. That's the image that I think of over and over again. And I'm not saying that people aren't going to continue to get angry and upset. And in fact, I don't think there's anything wrong with anger. That may sound really strange. I think if anger mobilizes you to do something about conditions that need to be corrected in the world, then by all means, use your anger to mobilize you if you need to. I get angry at starvation. I get angry at children dying all over the world because of malnutrition. I get angry at crime and the proliferation of guns in our society and the fact that people shoot each other all the time and we don't even pay much attention to a human life anymore. It doesn't even make the newspapers, all these people shooting each other. But my anger mobilizes me to do something about it, to speak out about it, to write about it, to maybe try to make a difference, maybe talk to a group of kids in a high school. Mobilizing is great, but being immobilized by it, wherein it keeps you from acting to do anything about it. You see, it's very irresponsible to need to be right. Extremely irresponsible. And almost all negative emotions are very, very irresponsible. You see, if you're going through a horrible divorce, as my friend was doing, and you are very upset about that, you can't do your job. You can't be with your children. You can't get along with your coworkers. You can't be healthy. You can't help anybody else to be healthy. You can hardly do anything except get more sick, older, tired, depressed. That's all you can do. It's the most irresponsible choice you can make. And it's a convenient payoff. I mean, that's one of the great payoffs. You can use that anguish that you're experiencing to keep you from being an effective human being. And you have a perfect cop-out every time when someone says to you, why aren't you getting anything done? How do you expect me to get anything done if you knew what's going on in my life? And you just use that. That's a wonderful excuse. It's a great excuse. It's a cop-out. Just like guilt is a terrific irresponsible choice for a human being to make. As long as I sit here and feel guilty about what I did or what I shouldn't have done or how could I have done that, then I don't have to do anything to correct it. I don't have to do any of that at all. So I just irresponsibly choose guilt and feel bad, and I can only experience guilt now, in this moment. And the more of it that I experience, the less likely I am able to do anything about it. And so I just become this irresponsible emotional wreck who not only makes my own life, unpleasant and unworkable, but largely makes those around me suffer as well. It's very irresponsible, all of these things. Responsibility is being loving and kind and decent and good to others, and to yourself particularly, so that you fill yourself up with this love, and then you can give it away everywhere. And even if there are things going on in your life that you don't like, you're equipped to be responsible, to do something, to look for solutions. If you're focused on your pain and how awful it is, then you simply stay there with that. Very irresponsible choice.
If you don't believe what goes around comes around, the next time you see somebody down, just smile at them. Just say hello and be friendly toward them. And you'll see that what you send out is what comes back. Now that law of the universe is so powerful that it affects every cell in your body. Every cell in your body. When you look at one cell in your body, ask yourself what makes the cell work. What makes a cell in your body work? Do you know what makes one individual little cell work? Harmony and cooperation. That's how cells work. An individual cell. If what's inside that cell, the electrons, the neutrons, and the protons, and all that physics stuff that's inside one, if any of them get out of whack and start not cooperating or not working in harmony, what happens to the cells around it? They're affected in some way, aren't they? What is cancer but cells gone amok? When one individual cell is affected in a negative way, that is, when it loses its harmony, when it loses its cooperation, then it affects negatively those cells around it. And those cells around it. And if you look at a blow-up of a cancer cell, you will see that it is no longer cooperating, but it's like the white cells are dominating and trying to eat up the other cells, and that's the disease, all right? And that spreads to another cell and to another cell, and before long, the harmony within you is, physiologically, is destroyed. There's two kinds of energy, supposedly, in every cell. One is the physics energy. Shirley MacLaine talks about this in her wonderful book, Out on a Limb. I recommend you read it. She talks about the physics of what is energy within one cell. And then that there's another kind of energy within a cell that scientists and physicists and chemists, none of us can figure out what it is, but it is what makes the whole thing work. They just call it the source. And that source, the nearest they can get to is love, or cooperation, or harmony, what we call love, which is just love. It's just cooperating and being in harmony with. All right? That's what love is. And that is what makes every single cell work. And when one doesn't work right, it affects the other cells. Now, for a minute, just for a minute, think of yourself as a cell, just as one big cell, okay? Now, one of us as a cell goes out of whack, goes amok, doesn't work right in some way. Does it affect those around us? One cell gone wrong can affect all the other cells around us. It's just a growth process, seeing bigger and bigger cells. But when you think about the entire size of our universe, which is endless, which we can't even begin to comprehend what endless means, and uncaused causes and so on, then you are as big as one of those tiny little cells inside of you. And if you go amok in some way, then you affect those around you. And if our planet, which is just another cell in billions and billions and billions of other cells, if our whole planet goes amok, that is, if we store up enough weapons and we do enough killing and we have enough hate, and as a people we do that, then we will not only affect everything down to that tiny little cell, but all the cells in our planet, in our universe, and it will go on forever. See, I have taken to sending out ICUS, a copy of my parable. I send these books out to all influential people in the world in every field. Just the last 2 weeks, I think our mailing lists have totaled over 4,000 at my own expense, just signing them and sending them out to all the government leaders, all the medical leaders, all education leaders, all people in celebrity status, all people associated with different religions and so on. I'm just sending them out. All right? Now, many times when you send things out in the mail to a large mailing list, you get some back. Karma. Understanding how our universe works. In every single obstacle that you run into in your life, there's an opportunity. Every obstacle you have is a hidden opportunity. And seeing it, rather than as something to complain about or call your lawyer about or get upset about or get depressed about or get cancer over or anything in between, you see there is an opportunity in every setback you have in life, including everything you're suffering from right now. Everything, whatever it may be. There's an opportunity in it. Look for the opportunity. Look for the fulfillment, the potential for finding out what you're made out of, rather than for finding out how well you can say, see, I told you things weren't going to work out for me, which is what neurotics do. So in sending out these books, I'll get 100 back. You send out 4,000, you get 100 back, that's a good day. Okay? Only 100 came back. Now, most people who send things out free and get some back say, well, this isn't working, I'm getting these back, I get 100 back and all that. To me, it's like, how can I find that person? This is a test. To me, that's a test from the universe to say, what are you made of? You're just going to give up and not find that person? Or are you going to go look for that person? Because that's to find out what you're made out of. And that's what I do with all of that, and have always done. And somehow just knew to do that. When it's somebody says no, it's how can I figure out a way to go around that no? Rather than I think that they're right, I'll just give up. It's always how can I get around that? Well, we sent out a book to Ken Keyes, Jr. Okay? Ken Keyes, Jr. wrote a wonderful book called Handbook to Higher Consciousness back in the early 1970s. Now, Ken Keyes, I sent him a copy of ICUS to this address that I had on an old book, and it came back. So I sent it to another book that I had of his 8 years later, and it came back. Right? Now I had 2 envelopes. I had this book in 2 envelopes. So I finally went to the bookstore and got his newest book, which is called A Conscious Person's Guide to Relationships, I believe, and sent it to that address out in Oregon. So after 3 tries, I sent it to him. And his wife, Penny, wrote back, and they were in Florida vacationing about a month or 2 later, and they called us, and they said, we'd like to get together with you. Thank you for sending ICUS. It's a beautiful book, and blah, 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 and it was very nice. Now, I got to tell you that Ken Keyes, Jr., who wrote The Conscious Person's Guide to Relationships, and perhaps the most powerful book about just raising our own consciousness as a human species, called The Handbook to Higher Consciousness, does not have a body, so to speak. He does not have a body. It's hard to explain what it's like. He got out of the Navy in 1946, and he was on Miami Beach, and it was in February during the polio season. And suddenly he said, he described it to me as if somebody had taken gasoline and poured it down his spine and lit a flame to it. That was how intense the heat was. And he was paralyzed from here down for the rest of his life. He's now, I think, 64. And he has been in a wheelchair since then with no power from here down. Every meal that he has to be fed. Every meal. He holds his mouth up like this and then put the food in and he kind of massages it and makes it go down. And he has to be turned 2 or 3 times a night, because he can't stay in the same position, and he has the feeling, but he has no muscle control, which is what polio is. He has feeling, but no power. All right? Now here's a man who has lived in this body which doesn't function, doesn't work, and is writing about optimal health and so on. Now he's written several other books, but the one I want to tell you about is called The 100th Monkey. The 100th Monkey is a philosophy based upon the writing of a man named Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake lives in England, and he has written a book which I've been studying, and long before I read Ken Keyes and met Ken, our evening together was just exquisite, wasn't it? It was just magnificent. It was so powerful to have a man sitting next to me in my car, and I drove him to one of my favorite restaurants, a Thai restaurant out in Pompano, and we had to strap him in, and his legs were just sort of hanging there. And it was almost like a marionette next to me. And as I looked at this man who smiled all the time and was genuinely, authentically beautifully, blissfully happy in this body that doesn't work hardly at all. It was just astounding. Well, back to Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake wrote a book called A New Science of Life, and it was voted by the American Academy of Physics as the book most likely to be burned by their academy. All right? Because it is so blasphemous and absurd and silly, the notions inside of it. What Rupert Sheldrake is suggesting is that memory, which is what we can recall of all the things that have happened to us, is simply not stored in the brain. It's just not stored in the brain. All kinds of physical evidence to, like where they do experiments with cutting out pieces of the brain, a lot of ways of scientific evidence of establishing this belief. Just let it in. Don't endorse it, just let it in. Don't bite off my finger. Just look to where it's pointing for a few minutes, okay? The notion is that if memory, of course, is not stored in our brain, then where is it? Right? The philosophy is very simple, that all members of a species are connected together through what they call morphogenetic fields, just very much like magnets. And these fields surround all human beings. The 100th monkey is the number, the 100th monkey. Off the coast of Japan, there's an island. And they took a group of these monkeys from one species, and they put sweet potatoes out there on the beach. And they watched the monkeys. And the monkeys began to wash the sweet potatoes in a certain way that was peculiar to this species. And they began to eat them in a way that was peculiar to this species. After a given amount of time, when a certain number of monkeys within that species began to do that, the same behavior began to crop up in monkeys of the same species on islands 200 and 300 miles away. Question is, how did it happen? How could that have happened? And that's, without going into all the details of that, if there is truth that all members of a species are connected, that all human beings are connected as well. And if all of us are connected in some way that we don't understand, but in fact are connected, then I'm not here to tell you that you have to be thinking positive thoughts because it'll improve your life. I'm here to tell you that you have an obligation because you could be depressing somebody in Uruguay right now by thinking negative thoughts. It's true. Now just think about it. Just let it in. The highest form of ignorance is to reject something you know nothing about. That's the highest form you can get to. We know so little about this whole idea. But what we do know is that when human beings begin to think in positive, healthy ways, that they reduce certain endorphins into the chemistry of your blood. This is from Anatomy of an Illness, Norman Cousins. And that when you think positive, happy, loving, laughing thoughts, there's a different chemistry that goes into your body than when you think depressing, negative, anguishing, despairing thoughts. And that thinking, the way that you decide to think, has a dramatic effect on your chemistry and on your physiology and on your health as a human being. And that we know that when they did the artificial heart transplants, when they were looking for all the people up in Kentucky, who they were going to pick, there were many, many volunteers because a lot of these people only have a few weeks left to live. So if they could get a few more months, they were very willing to be expended. The number one criteria was the will to live. What kind of an attitude does this human being have? How do they think? Because we do not want somebody who gives up on life, who is going to feel bad, who is going to be telling himself that he shouldn't be in this position. So as you begin to think about the possibility, here's what Ken Keyes did in The 100th Monkey. He said, and The 100th Monkey is about nothing I've said so far. That's just all what I learned through my own research and my own reading and so on. The 100th Monkey is a book about nuclear war. The belief is this. If enough people on our planet think there's going to be a nuclear holocaust and believe that it's going to happen, we are going to create it by the way that we think. When a critical mass, and that's the theory, the 100th monkey, when you get to a certain number of people thinking anything, then it begins to spread to the rest of us all over our planet, and we begin to act upon those collective thoughts. The thinking is, who knows, I'm open to it, that we are not only connected to everybody who's alive, but everybody who ever has been, and everybody who ever will be. That we may all in some way be connected. So that if we want, the number one thing in the Hunger Project is that we are trying to raise the consciousness of the world, to help people to understand that starvation is something we cannot tolerate any longer. We won't have it. We won't think of it as something that is inevitable. What is happening now is people are beginning to say, what can I do? How can I change that? The same thing is true with nuclear war. If you want to think about raising your children, my friends, what more important parental task do you have than to make sure that our world is a place that's going to be inhabitable for our children and our grandchildren? Do you know that when I talk to my young children and ask them what concerns them the most, do you know what it is? It's nuclear war. It's what's going to happen to us when the bombs go off. If enough of us think that, we're going to make the bombs go off. Do you understand that's what's behind building more and more and more missiles? Because we begin to act on the images that we have. And so what the 100th Monkey is about is trying to help people to think that it's impossible. We must never have that. We can't even begin to imagine having something like that. Absolutely not. We will not think in terms of bombs going off. And if enough of us do it, and enough of us tell other people about it, and then, in fact, as Victor Hugo said, there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And we can make any idea have its time come by collectively thinking in these ways. And imagine that we're all connected like this. Imagine.
We have to get rid of the idea that we're separate from one another.
Yeah. This business about the Russians versus the Americans and the women versus the men and the blacks versus the white, and we don't see the similarities. We don't see that if one of us is suffering any place on this planet, then a part of all of us is. The only difference between all one and alone is just one L. A good example of that is watching my mother with my grandmother. My wonderful grandmother, who was almost 96 years old, was dying, and my mother was taking care of her. And she would go in there with a banana, and she would pull the peel down, and she would mush the banana up in her hands or in her mouth like a mother does to her baby, and she would feed it to her mother, and she would cradle her in her arms. And she would take her underwear, which when you get very old and you're getting close to the end of your life, you kind of forget about your hygiene habits. She was always extremely clean, but toward the end of her life, she just lost interest in that. And my mother would take her clothes, her soiled clothes and underwear, and wash them and help her put them back on again. And she would hold her in her arms and put food into her mouth and massage her neck to make the food go down. And I looked at her, and my mother was 68, I believe, at the time, and my grandmother was 95. And I looked at them and said, who is mother and who is child? Which one is which? And wasn't it just an instant ago in time, if there is such a thing, wasn't it just that much time ago that it was reversed? That the one who is now the baby was the mother holding the other one and putting bananas into her mouth and cleaning her underwear and changing her diapers and all of that. And it really brought home the essence of we are all one. And time is just sort of our way of defining what happens in sequence in life. But it doesn't have any meaning. I mean, there's really no time in the world. There's only just the world the way it is. And each of us must accept that if any one of us have any suffering going on, then all of us are a part of that. And that's our responsibility. See, you can't get this transformation that I'm talking about in 1 year or 10 years. The wonderful Chinese proverb said that if you want to think a year ahead, sow a seed. If you want to think 10 years ahead, plant a tree. And if you think 100 years ahead or more, educate the people. Once we educate the people and raise a few generations of people who won't be soldiers and who won't kill and who do love and who do see all of us as one and who understand that a person in Japan who is unemployed as an auto worker is just as much of a human problem as a person in Detroit, even though our proximity dictates that we are more compassionate toward the person in Detroit. That's just because we can't think globally. We're only thinking locally. And that it's still any human being who's unemployed is a problem for all of us. And any child who is starving because they're in Africa, a continent and an ocean away, doesn't mean it any less affects all of us.
A lot of people operate under the assumption that I give my love to people who deserve it, and that's a mistake, isn't it?
Everyone deserves it. Everyone. Gandhi said, hate the sin, love the sinner. And that's a very important line, very important philosophical approach to life. Hate the sin, love the sinner. The things that people do are things that we can help them to correct and to change, and within ourselves and other people and so on. And we can teach them and help them to grow to not be destructive. But everybody deserves our love. And until we start thinking that way, we're going to always have dichotomies. We're going to always have you versus me, us versus them. And as long as there's that usness and me-ness and you-ness, there will never be all of us together. See, what we need to do is all go up in a spaceship and look down at the earth and see this fragile little planet that we live on, and that we are all one on this planet, and that we must all recognize that. Instead of looking for all the things that separate us, instead of building more weapons to destroy us, we must begin looking for ways that we can all get along. And as hokey as it sounds, if we don't do it, we won't survive it as a species, or it'll be left to generations, billions of years from now, who can evolve past the Holocaust that we'll create, to learn the essential messages of all great religious leaders, all great spiritual people, all great philosophers, that we are love, and that we are the essence of what makes this whole thing work is all within us. And the truth won't be revealed to any of us until we recognize that we're a part of that truth. We're all a part of it, and we're all one.
I have gone from telling people how to get something to trying to teach people now how to be something. And being is the essence of what I'm talking about. You must be it. Whatever it is, you must be health. You must not be trying to get it from pills or a doctor. You must be it. You must think it, live it, and be it. The great tape that I was talking about was Earl Nightingale's. It's called The Strangest Secret. It's the most popular cassette tape ever made. Earl Nightingale's tape goes like this. He said, the strangest secret is that human beings become whatever it is they visualize themselves to be. That if you were to take 100 people, say 100 people off the street, and just follow them at age 25 and follow them for 40 years, you will find at the age of 65 that 3 of those people will be independently wealthy. 3. 42 of them will have done all right, but will still need some financial help in order to get through their days, the rest of their lives. And 55 of them will be broke. 55 people out of 100 are going to be broke. And 42 are not going to have enough money to get through without help from someone. And 3 are going to be independent financially. Why? That was the question he postulated. Why? And I ask you, why do you think that's true? Because people see themselves in a certain way. And they think about the way that they see themselves all day long. At Macy's, the great big department store in New York, they had a program where they were promoting people to management, but they were taking people from outside of the company. And the unions all got together and they said, this is unfair, and how dare you do this, and we think you should promote from within. They said, okay, we will. And they put together, they said, here's what we'll do. We're going to offer a management training program, and we're going to give credit for it. And you have to stay 2 days a week, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and go through this management training. We're going to give it to you free as part of your benefit, because we want to promote from within. That's something we want to do. And the unions thought that was great, and everybody was real pleased about that. So they had their sign-ups and all of that. Now, let me ask you, what percentage of people that worked for Macy's do you think were willing to stay from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock 2 days a week to learn management principles and to learn management training and to become trained free and get college credit for it in order to move on up into the management circle and to improve themselves and to make more money and do the things that they want to do? What percentage do you think volunteered to do that? 3 out of every 100 people took them up on it. 97 said, wait a minute, what the hell are you doing? You want me to stay after? 2 hours sitting there listening to this junk? You must be crazy. I don't want to do that. I got stuff to do. I got to go home and drink beer or whatever it is they've got to do. 3, the same 3. You see, there's a lot of people who want to get 100% out and put in 1 or 2%. And they want to do that over and over again. And you see examples of it everywhere. Now, the great secret, the strangest secret, we become what we think about all day long. The question is, what do you think about all day long? Now, I'm not talking about whether you walk around saying, hey, I'm terrific and I'm going to do great things, and that's it. This is not it at all. Creative visualization is understanding first how you think. You think in pictures. Do you know that? We think as humans in pictures. We don't think in words. If I say garbage can, you don't think G-A-R, there's a B in there, there's an A-G-E-C-A-N, a can, and you don't think like that. You see a picture of a garbage can. If I say microphone, you picture a microphone. If I say beautiful person, you have a picture. All of our thinking is done in pictures. The greatest contribution that psychologists have made in this century, and there haven't been many, all right? The great contribution is we have discovered that an image gets stored away in you, whatever you is, whoever you are, gets stored away within you exactly the same as an experience, as doing something. That your subconscious, whatever that is, wherever that is, it's like a robot. It's like a dumb, stupid robot. It just stores things away, and they stay there forever. Forever. My grandmother was 95. She died last April 15th. She was almost 96 years old. And in the last couple of years of her life, she started talking about things that happened in 1891. And it was a Tuesday, she said, and it was the 13th of April. It was a Tuesday, and my girlfriend Gladys, she came over and I said, Grandma, how do you know a Tuesday in April the 13th in 1891? It was there. We looked up. We went back and looked through all the calendar, and there she was. Right, Tuesday on the 13th. It was there. Everything that happens to you is stored away. Your brain has trillions of cells, not millions, not billions, trillions of cells. It is capable of things that are just so phenomenal as far as healing, as far as health goes, as far as success goes, and it all depends on how you see yourself. Now, you get trained as a young person not to see yourself as a very competent human being, especially you women. Most of you were trained not to think of yourselves as equal with men or better. When you were little girls, many of you were taught that in order to be athletic, that's not feminine and that's not appropriate, and you don't do that, and so you have a lot of these sentences. And I ask you about these sentences that you use in your mind. The I'ms. I'm nervous. I'm shy. I'm not very good at mathematics. I'm not a good cook. I'm clumsy. You figure out the I'm. Now, every I'm that you have, a lot of that was encouraged because you weren't encouraged to take risks. And you must take risks if you want to be successful in life. You must take risks. When you're a child, I've heard parents say, don't you go near that water until you know how to swim. And I think, there's something missing in that logic there somewhere. And so you train yourself when you're young because you believe that stuff. Not that it's anybody else's fault. You believe it. You believed it. You didn't have to. Now you got to take responsibility for buying it. And if it doesn't apply anymore, sell it. And if nobody wants to buy it, then just give it away. Get rid of it. All right? And change the images. Now, what kind of images do you have? Here we are. We're going on a trip. And here's the car. And here's the trunk. Okay? Now, we're getting all ready, and we put all the suitcases in the suitcase. Clearly, it says in the car manual how many suitcases this trunk holds. 5 suitcases. It says that. You got 6 suitcases sitting right there on the ground. Now, how do you visualize it? Who are you? What kind of a thinker are you? Do you know that most people, all of the 55 who are going to be broke, most of the 42 who are going to need help, are going to say, you can't get those suitcases in that trunk. Now, when you have that kind of a picture that it can't be done, do you know how that gets stored away in terms of the action that you take on it? You say, we're just going to have to repack them, or we're going to have to put one in the back seat, and that's it. We can't be done. There's 3 or 4 of those who say, now there's a challenge. I know it can be done. And you know there are people like that. Those suitcases are going to get in the trunk. I know it. And they start maneuvering this, and they put it over there, and if I did this, and they see it happening. What kind of visions do you have? Who are you? I coached basketball for a couple of years back in Detroit. And I had read this study about visualizing and teaching people how to shoot free throws. All right? They took 100 people over here, and they just took them into the gym, and they said, shoot 100 free throws. And they shot, and they said, okay, go back and come back in a month, and we're going to test you again. Then they took another group, and they had them practice for 2 hours a day, shooting free throws. All right? Just practice over and over again. Then they took another group of people, and they taught them how to use visualization in shooting free throws. They had them close their eyes at the line, and they had them bounce and hold the ball. Now, this is without a ball, all right? We took these young men and trained them how to shoot free throws in bed, and how to get into bed at night and to close their eyes and to hold the ball in their hand and to actually see the ball and to feel it and to shoot it and to put the arc on it right and to visualize it going through the hoop and to see it, not to see it bouncing off the rim and saying, I can't do this, but to practice this and doing that for 2 hours a day, literally seeing it happen. Then they retested all 3 groups, and they found that the people who didn't practice or didn't do anything deteriorated. Their skills went down. The people who practiced every day improved like 23, 24%. The people who visualized also improved 23 or 24%. And the people who did it together, practice with the visualization, could improve as much as 40%. I'm not standing up here in front of all of you people saying that all you have to do is put a different picture in your head and your life is going to turn around. I am saying, and get this, I am saying that you must start first with the kinds of pictures that you have, and then they will get stored away in you as reality. And when that reality gets stored away in you, you will start acting on that reality rather than on another reality. Now, the reality that many of you operate on is this. It's the cold season. There's a flu going around. 44 states have got it. You have fever and you get coughing and you're going to be tied up for 2 or 3 weeks and you're going to have to go to a doctor and you're going to get it because it's going around. And you expect it, and you warn your children about it, and you tell them, see, I learned from Mrs. Scarf, because she was weird. She was wonderful. She was very influential, but she was weird. She used to tell the kids, don't walk across the linoleum, because if you do, you'll catch a cold if you don't have any socks on. In the orphanage. And I used to get down and look. I did. I was only a little kid. I'd get down and I'd look, and I'd say, where the hell are those bugs? You know, she talked about that. There's none in that linoleum. And I'd go around to all the kids in the orphanage and say, that's not true. There's no bug. What happens? Do they go up through your feet and they land in your nose? I said, how does that happen? I said, she's just kidding you. It's a test. And they thought I was really strange. And she would say, like, if you leave the window open and you get a draft, you're going to catch a cold. And every time she told a kid that, I noticed that they had a cold the next day. Because I always wanted the window open, you know, and there were about 9 of us sleeping in there. I never got a cold because I didn't believe that. I didn't believe you could get a cold from a draft when we were out playing hockey all day long in 40 degrees below weather. And then suddenly a little breeze is going. If you see it happening, if you believe it, then it's going to happen. You see, with visualization goes expectations. With expectation go the choices that you make. And it starts with the kind of pictures that you have. Now, if you are in business and you're selling real estate and you visualize that things aren't going to work out, and you tell yourself, I'm not going to close this deal, I never have before. This person is just using me. I know that I'm going to show them 14 pieces of property and they're not interested in anything anyway. I can see that these people don't really care about me and it isn't going to work for me. If you think that way, you store that away, and that gets stored away inside of you exactly the same as if you'd have gone up to them and said, I know you're not going to buy this damn place anyway, and blah, blah, blah. And you had been real abusive. And it gets stored away the same way inside of you. Then what happens is you start acting out on those images. What you have to do, my friends, and I'm going to show you how to do it in a few minutes. I'm going to not just talk, I'm going to do it. All right? We're going to do it right here. There's a country song about that. Looking for love in all the wrong places. You've heard that. Bam, 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 bam. If you go to a singles bar, you're going to go home with a jerk if you're looking for love. If you are love and you live love and you send it out, there'll be so much love in your life you won't know what to do with it. It's just a simple karmic principle. When you begin to see that all the things happening are the result of what you are doing, what you are creating, that you are a creator of yourself, then you see all of that stuff shifting around. Now, how do you visualize yourself with your health? Here's how most people do it, all right? Here's my brother, I got to tell you. He called me up long distance. He said, Wayne, I got a cold. It's Monday. He said, it's in my nose. I said, yeah, that's great. Long distance, huh? Yeah, long distance. He said, but by tomorrow, it'll be down in my throat. Long distance. He's telling me this, huh? He said, by Wednesday, it'll be in my chest. It always goes that way. He said, Thursday, I'll have a fever, and I'll probably have to take Friday off. Here's a guy with a sniffle on Monday morning taking Friday off. Why is he doing that? And I tell him, look, Jim, hold it right there. Hold it right there. What I want you to do is try to visualize how little I care. It's really important. Now, that's not an unkind thing to say. You might think so. But he's got to know. When you expect things to get worse and you picture it getting worse, you start acting on it getting worse. And you're going around looking for your cold to get worse. Never tell your children that their colds are going to get worse. Never tell your children they're going to have a fever and it's going to last. Never tell them that they're sick. Always tell them it's a mistake. You can do something about this. You can correct this. When Tracy used to come down to visit me up from Michigan, and she'd come down and she supposedly had allergies when she was 9 or 10 or 11. I don't know when it was. Her mother had decided she had allergies. And she had allergy medicine. She'd bring it down, and she'd say, Mom says I have to take this every day. I'd say, terrific. You know, here it is in the medicine cabinet. I don't want any part of it, okay? I don't want it near me. I don't like that stuff, you know. It might jump out and give me one of your damn allergies. Before you know it, I'll have that stupid stuff. And so she would get so involved in what she was doing all summer in Florida and playing. And by the end of the time it was go back in September, here was this whole bottle of allergy medicine. I said, what the hell are we going to do with it? We'd pour it down the toilet, leave about this much left. We did studies on allergies. They have found that nobody in the world has allergies when they're making love. I mean, think about this, you know? Yeah. Come here, honey. I got something for you. Say, get away from me. You think you're touching me with those Snoopies coming out of your nose? Forget it. It's gone. It's gone. It's just gone. I don't know what happened. Amazing. It's amazing. Pollen must have just blown away. You can know you got a southerly wind that blew it right away. And then it's hours of wailing away, having a wonderful time. Then when it's over, oh, that stuff is back, you know. It all depends on the way that you think. What are your visions of yourself? You see, all of this business about if you get tired, how many of you get tired? You don't have to get tired. I don't get tired. When it's time to go to sleep, there's no insomnia in my life, and there doesn't have to. Insomnia is one more of those things where you start telling yourself, I'm not going to be able to sleep. Look, you've been out, you're partying, you're at a convention, you're in New Orleans, get into bed, let's say, and it's 2 o'clock, and you know you got to get up at 6. You look at your watch. All right, it's 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock? 4 o'clock. 5 o'clock? 6. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I were to fall asleep right this second, and I'm not even close, all right, I'd only get 4 hours of sleep. Here it comes, ready? Great imagery now. Boy, am I going to be tired tomorrow. Whew! Oh, I'm going to be tired. That'll keep you awake for at least an hour, all right? Your body just kind of goes, oh my God, and you start interfering with it. Your mind starts programming you, all right? Now, an hour later, you look at your watch and say, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. 3 hours. Now you upgrade your neurotic expectations for yourself. I'm going to be a zombie tomorrow. And then when you get out of bed and the alarm goes off, if you sleep, what do? You start counting backwards now. 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock. You put your body instantly on droop. Kind of put your eyes sort of unbagged. Don't expect anything out of me today. I didn't get any sleep last night or whatever. Until someone comes along halfway through the day and says, you know, we got a game tonight and we're going to go out and have a few drinks and we're going to, hey, that's great. Yeah, I think I'd like to do that. It's a choice. You ever notice how tired you get when you got something unpleasant to do? You know, you look at the lawn equipment and look at the roller and the edger. I'm going to lie down for 3 or 4 months. I'm really tired. It's a choice. If you just tell yourself, I don't need to think tired thoughts. When I tell you that the kind of visualization I'm talking about can end asthma, asthma is an easy one. Anybody who's suffered with asthma, and I've had a stepson who's had it, he holds on to it and he believes it and he wants to hang on to it, and that's it. He's going to have asthma until he doesn't want it anymore. And I tell him that and he just gets mad because he wants to hold on to his asthma. And he gets a lot of attention for it, and he gets a lot of people to remind him that he's sickly and that he can't do this and do that. And so he gets a lot of positive sort of affirmation for his negative reaction. I have seen people eliminate a lot more than asthma. When people ask me, what kind of a therapist are you? Where do you fit in? You know, are you a behaviorist? Are you a rational emotive therapist? Are you Freudian psychoanalyst? I call myself a do-do therapist. And I really mean that. A do-do therapist is someone who believes in the great secrets of the universe. One of the great secrets that you'll read in Icus is that I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And not one moment before. I mean, not one of you who knows how to swim by watching somebody else do it or listening to somebody else give you instruction. You know how to swim because you got in the water and you flop around and you fill your mouth up a few times and then eventually you do it. And you know something? What do you think is the difference in your physical skills between the moment before when you couldn't swim and the moment afterwards when you did let go and could swim for the first time? You think your physical skills are any different? They're exactly the same. We all know how to swim. Now you believe you can. And when you believe you can, you just do it. You just do it. And if you can't ride a bicycle, there's a woman who came to me and said, I can't ride a bicycle. My parents wouldn't let me. My mother would never let me get on a bicycle when I was a little kid. And I had these big white teeth, and she was afraid I would break them. And I said, okay, that's great. Let's go. She said, go? Where are we going? She wanted to sit in the office. I said, I've got a bicycle downstairs in the garage, and we'll just go on, and I'm going to teach you how to ride a bike. You think I'm paying these kind of prices to come here and have you teach me how to ride a bicycle? I want to know why I can't. I said, oh, well, you didn't say that. That'll take another 30 seconds. You can't because you never got on one. And as soon as you do, and are willing to fail and fall down a few times, then you'll know how to ride it. And until that, you can blame Mama forever. But it isn't going to change a thing. If you want to change something in your life, if you want to quit smoking, you don't need to go to the shit clinic. You don't need to go and poke holes in your cigarettes, so you get a hernia. trying to get that nicotine down into your lungs, and a little bit less each time. And they have now a thing out called poo-poo spray. I don't know if you've seen this, but it smells like poo-poo, all right? And you spray it on your fingers so that every time you go, oh, no, I won't be having any of those today, no. Now, you don't have to do that. What you do is, the first thing you do is you see yourself as an ex-smoker. You just see that. You visualize yourself there, and you take credit for having such a wonderful picture of yourself. You do that first. And then the second thing you do is you tell yourself how easy this is going to be. This isn't hard. There's nothing difficult about quitting smoking. You just do it. You just don't put cigarettes in your mouth one day at a time. That's what you do. And you don't tell yourself, I'm going to want them, I'm going to get fat, and all of these you don't do that. You stop the blame, and you do it. You want to lose weight. You see yourself looking the way you want to look, instead of going on a diet. Everybody I know on a diet is fat. And if you change the way you see yourself, then when you've eaten enough, you stop. You just see yourself in a different way. You stop that. No, I don't want any more. You say, I think I'll exercise a little more. I'm going to go out and I'm going to do some kind of exercise. I'm going to walk. I'm going to get myself on an exercise bike. I'm going to go to a dance class. I see myself this way. Now I'm just going to act out on that instead of saying, oh, it's so hard to quit. It's just so hard to lose weight. I'm so depressed. I think I'll have some candy as soon as I get over that, And I had a person come up to me after a talk one time and said, Dr. Dyer, you mean to tell me you never get depressed, ever? I said, of course not. She says, oh, that's depressing. Oh, that depresses me even more. You see, it depends on how you see yourself. See, everything that's happening to you, including getting older, is a choice. You don't have to think old. Most people who get older think old. I run with a guy who's in his 90s. 90s. It's true. I'm not kidding either. His name is Ernie. He's been married 3 times. He's 92. He's outlived all of his wives. He's going with a woman now who's 51 years younger than he is. 51 years younger. She doesn't know how old he is. He looks about 62, 63 years old. He runs 6 miles every day. He's very active. He got mad when they turned him down for a mortgage application at 92. He says, what the hell's the problem here? I'll pay it back. I've always paid my bills before. I said, Ernie, you're 92 years old. They don't want to invest money in people 92. He said, what the hell's the problem? I don't understand that. I said, Ernie, look, and I've told him this. I said, some people are positive, and I am. I wrote the books on it, all right? I said, some things can be fatal, and watch out for it. He said, what? I said, sex, for example. He said, oh, to me, if she dies, she dies. I said, that's her problem. So that's happened before. He said, I asked her about sex. He said, I checked that out first thing. And she said to me, infrequently. He said, right away I asked her, is that 1 word or 2? Infrequently, you say, never mind, it's too late. He's talked to me about his oldest boy, and it's true. He's talking to me. We're on the beach one day. We're walking. We did a 6-mile walk in the morning, and then we were going to jog in the evening. And he's talking about his oldest son. He said, my oldest boy's getting ready to die. I said, what the hell are you talking about? He said, yeah, just like his mother. He said, she's going to die. She died at this age. I said, well, how old is he? 73. He says, oldest boy is 73. I said, well, you got a picture of him? He said, sure. His son looks like Socrates. I mean, he had this long white beard. He was this old-looking man. This was his son. It looked like he could have been his grandfather. See, if you're going to have the visualizations I've been talking about today, and you must change those pictures, and I mentioned earlier I want to show you how to do it, you have to send away all blame for everything in your life. All right? All blame must go. You can't be blaming anything that's going on in your life on anyone except yourself. Your birth order, it doesn't matter whether you're the youngest, the oldest, the middle child. It's like wherever you are is where you were supposed to be. And if your parents did anything, you remind yourself that they did what they knew how to do. You can't ask any more of anyone. And forgive them, whatever it is. Whoever in your life is causing any dissonance, any anguish, any pain, whoever they are, any grudges that you've had, any anger that you're holding on to, anything that's lasted a long time, forgive. Love is forgiving, and it is forgiving. It is both. And it's the same word. You must give, and you must forgive. along with it. And if you keep that in mind and take all the blame out and say, I created who I am. My personality is who I chose. If I have been shy, I didn't inherit shy genes. I have been making shy choices. I am not a nervous person. I have been making nervous choices. I am not a person who's not good at selling. I have been making non-selling choices. I have been thinking like a duck instead of like an eagle. Just for a moment, just take a couple of minutes and just kind of calm yourself down and try this with me. Just try it. Hold your hand out if you want to. I mean, however you want to do it. And picture in your hand a lemon. Kind of close your eyes if you want to and listen to my instructions. And take the lemon and feel the texture of the lemon. And open your eyes and look at it. See if you can see a lemon there. See if you can see the little bumps that are on a lemon. See if you can see the little green nub on one end and how it comes to sort of a little point at the other end. And feel it. And feel a little bit of the moisture almost that's on the skin. Just practice for a second. Just take a knife, paring knife, your favorite knife, and just cut it right down the center, right in half. Right? Just kind of slice it. Here. And then take the pointy-ended side and put it away. And then take the other half of the lemon and look at it. And run your finger along the top of it and feel the moisture. Can you feel that? Now take the lemon, and as you hold it and see that lemon, just move it up close to your nose so that you can smell it. Just bring it right up and smell the fragrance of it. See if you can actually smell the citric acid. Now hold it close to your nose. Now take it back down. Now open up your mouth and take the lemon and move it up close to your mouth, as close as you can get it, and take a bite right out of it. Go ahead, just take a bite out of it. Now what's happening in your mouth right now? Okay. Do you have saliva in your mouth? Most of you have. You're going to get a little more in about another 5 seconds. You feel the saliva coming into your mouth? Why is saliva coming into your mouth? Because citric acid is attacking your mouth right now. And the only defense you have against citric acid in the billions of years of evolution that have produced you is saliva. Saliva goes into your mouth to fight it. It's still there, isn't it? Mouth kind of dry. You feel it? That's visualization. It's nothing difficult. There's nothing complex about it. That's what hypnotism is. Well, next time you go to a dentist, you close your eyes when he's about to drill. Say, no Novocaine today. I'm going to have an orgasm instead. Haven't had one for a while. You get this one now, you're going to be real good. All right, I need some volunteers now. What you do is you think, as the drill goes on, every time the drill goes on, you think of the most positive, beautiful, exquisite, loving experience you've ever had in your life. When the drill goes off, you shut it out. When the drill goes on, many times in the dentist I say, look, will you turn the drill on another minute or so? Just about ready. You turn that drill off.
The importance of visualization for me in imagery can be related to almost every single thing that you do in life. If you're a salesperson and you visualize a sale not working out, or even if you have that thought that that person probably won't want to buy this thing from me, or they won't want to close on this deal that we have agreed to, if you think that way and visualize it that way, you're creating the opportunity for you to have exactly that happen to you. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you see it in your mind as working out, closing the deal, getting someone to buy the product, whatever it is, and if you're selling brake linings to a hardware store, and you can see the brake linings on their shelf, and you can see the receipt, and you can practice that image and see it, and then operate on that image. If it doesn't work out, let's start from that premise, which I don't even let in, because I know it will. And when you know it will, it will. But if it doesn't, you say, all right, instead of, see, this guy's wrong, I knew that this karma stuff, and I don't want to hear any more of this stuff, you don't do that. You say, there's something in this for me. It's not supposed to be working out right now. I wonder what I can do to learn from that. Let me re-examine it. Let me look at it. You don't blame anybody else, all right? Blame must go. If you are going into a tax audit and you believe that it's not going to work out, you are going to act out on that auditing image that you have in your mind. And you will not prepare yourself in the same way as if you believe that you're not going to have to pay more taxes and that you've been an honest taxpayer and that you filled out your forms properly and that you are entitled to not have to pay additional taxes, and that's how you're going to operate. And you get an accountant who believes that as well, and you go in from that premise, you'll find yourself having much, much less difficulty than if you go in saying, they're going to look through my records, this is going to take 2 days, they have no right to go through all of these things, I hate it when they do this, and you go through this whole process. You are creating what it is that you don't want for yourself, because you're going to operate and behave on the basis of whatever image you have. If you believe it's going to be nasty, you're going to start behaving in ways to have that outcome come about. If you want to get a parking place, you can image yourself seeing one. Instead of looking for no place to park, you begin to see yourself as having one. If you want to have health, you begin to see yourself looking and feeling and acting the way you want to, and never detracting from that picture, and you can make that happen for yourself in your life. If you don't want negative things to go on in your life, then practice visualizing and having positive affirmations toward the things that you previously thought negatively about. I like the example of calling the phone company and asking them if they can come out and fix your phone. And if they say to you, well, we'll be there by noon because we can't give you an exact time, you will find that if you put the phone down and say, they're not going to come, I know they're not, they never have before, and they always abuse us, and how dare they say that, and you start waiting for them not to come, by 11 o'clock when they haven't arrived yet, all you're doing is getting yourself more and more upset and helping them not to come, not in the sense of that if you visualize it, that's going to get the truck there. I'm not saying that, although I'm not discounting that either. What I'm saying is that if you image them coming and they're not there yet, what you will do is start acting on the image of them being there, and you'll pick up the phone at 11 o'clock and you'll say, I'd like to see if your image is consistent with mine, and can you tell me what time that truck will be there? You start acting in ways to bring about what you want, rather than waiting till 12 o'clock, walking out storming mad, and never having done anything to correct it. Your thought processes create the images that you have. Those images create the behavior. And you can't back one up from the other unless you're willing to think that it's going to work out, and that's the premise you're operating from. That's a very important point for people if they want to be enlightened. If you believe that it's going to work out, then you'll start to see opportunities. If you don't, then you'll see obstacles.
Choosing your own greatness. The choices we are faced with every day of our lives determine the direction in which we grow, the ways in which we change, or if we change or grow at all. Taking responsibility for your own life, not blaming others, building loving relationships, discovering the power of forgiveness, goal setting. You have been listening as Dr. Dyer's personal experiences have illuminated the importance of these positive life choices. We now would like to introduce you to yet another side of Wayne Dyer in this very special recording, never before heard in this form. It is an essay written and read by Dr. Dyer at a time in his life when he was first ready to express the underlying principle upon which all his realization of inner strengthening has been built. And to this day, he advocates that all of humanity, all of us, can work toward making choices that lead us to true self-actualization. In this essay, Dr. Dyer speaks of a person, a portrait, if you will, of someone who is completely self-actualized, not as a mythical person, not as a goal for anyone, but as a look at what it can mean to be alive and functioning at one's fullest potential. Let's listen now as Dr. Dyer describes the circumstances which led him to draw this portrait of the kind of free-spirited person we all desire to be.
I had just talked to my daughter, and we had a beautiful conversation about her first experience on a horse, horseback riding. And I finished talking to her, and I felt so loving and so good and so happy that she was willing to try so many things that so many kids her age were afraid of. And I said, this is the moment. And I went upstairs and sealed myself off And when I came down, this is exactly word for word what I wrote, without one correction. The person who is devoid of all erroneous zone behavior may seem to be a fictional character to you, but being free from erroneous zone activities is not a mythological concept, nor a fictionalized account of a Superman created in the mind of a dreamy novelist. Being fully functioning is a very real possibility for you, and complete present moment mental health can be a choice. The rest of this final zone is devoted to a description of how a person who is free from erroneous zones thinks and behaves, both in mind and actual living experiences. You will see this development of an individual who is quite unique, separated out from the majority of people, and always distinguishable by an uncanny ability to be creatively alive in virtually all life-space moments. Non-erroneous zone people, which I now call NEZ, N-E-Z, are different from the normals in our world. While they look very much like everyone else, if you observe very closely, you'll note distinct qualities, none of which are racial, socioeconomic, or sexual, which disconnects them from so many other people. They do not fit neatly into any role definition, job descriptions, geographic patterns, educational levels, or financial statistics. There's a different quality about them, but the different part is not discernible by scanning the traditional external factors that typify many efforts at classifying people. They may be rich or poor, male or female, black or white, living anywhere, doing just about anything, and yet they are different in that they have no erroneous zones. How can you tell when you run into a NEZ person? Watch them. Listen to them. This is what you'll discover. First, and most obviously, you see a person who likes virtually everything about life. Yep, this is a liker. A person who is comfortable doing just about anything, and one who wastes no time in complaining or wishing that things were otherwise. They are enthusiastic about life, and they want all that they can get out of it. They like picnics, movies, books, sports, concerts, cities, farms, animals, mountains, and just about anything that you can include in your list. They just plain like. When you're around them, you'll note a startling absence of grumbling, moaning, or even passive sighing. If it rains, they like it. If it's hot, they dig it rather than croak about it. If they're in a traffic jam or at a party or all alone, they simply deal with what is there. No pretending to enjoy, but a sensible acceptance of what is, and an outlandish ability to delight in virtually everything. Ask them what they don't like, and they are hard-pressed to come up with an honest answer. They don't have sense enough to come in out of the rain. Why? Because they see rain as beautiful, thrilling, and something to experience. They like it. Slush doesn't send them into a fury. They observe it, splash around in it, and accept it as a part of what it means to be alive. Do they like cats? Yes. Bears? Yes. Worms? Yep. You'll be hard-pressed to come up with things, events, people, activities, or ideas that they dislike. They live, and while such annoyances as disease germs, droughts, mosquitoes, floods, and the like are not warmly embraced by NEZ people, they never spend any of their present moments complaining about them or wishing that they weren't so. If situations need to be eradicated, then they will very likely work as eradicators, enjoying themselves and living all of their present moments. Try as you might, you'll have a tough time coming up with something they'll dislike doing. Truly, they are likers of life, and they wallow in all of it, getting out of it all that is possible for them. A NEZ person is free from guilt and all of the attendant anxiety that goes with using up your present moments, being immobilized over past events. Certainly they can admit to making mistakes, and they can vow to avoid repeating certain behaviors that are counterproductive in any way. But they do not waste their time wishing that they hadn't done something, or being upset because they dislike something that they had done at an earlier moment in their life. Complete freedom from guilt will be the shocking behavior that you will observe in your NEZ person. No lamenting the past, and no efforts to make others choose their own guilt by asking such inane questions as, "Why didn't you do it differently?" Or "Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" And so on. They seem to recognize that life lived through is just that, and no amount of feeling bad will alter the past. While they practice this non-guilt on themselves without any effort, because it is natural, They are remarkably free from even helping others to choose guilt for themselves, because they see with a third internal eye that feeling bad in the present moment only reinforces a poor self-image, and that learning from the past is a far superior tact over remonstrating about the past. You'll never see them manipulating others by telling them how bad they've been, nor will you be able to manipulate them with the same tactics. They won't get angry at you. They'll simply ignore it and see you as someone who is a guilt dispenser. Rather than being upset at you, they'll go away, or they'll change the subject. Hence, you won't even recognize that the very strategy that works so beautifully on most people has failed dismally on your Nez friend. Rather than smear themselves and others with guilt, they just unceremoniously pass when it comes along. Similarly, your Nez chap will be a non-worrier. You'll soon note that circumstances that drive many people to frenzy will be mildly internalized by a Nez person. They are not planners and putters away for the future. They refuse to worry when you do, and they keep themselves unmucked up by the accompanying anxiety that goes with worry. You can't drive him or her crazy with worry. They don't know how to do it. Almost as if it is just not a part of their makeup. Not necessarily calm at all moments, but just unwilling to spend any present moments disasterizing about things in the future over which they have no control. They are very present moment oriented, and they have an internal signal that seems to remind them that all worrying must take place now in the present moment, and that it is a foolish way to go about living one's current life. With no present moments ever available for awfulizing, they just never seem to get around to the business of worry that so occupies most lives. Your Nez person is able to live now rather than in the past or the future. They are unthreatened by the unknown, and they seek out experiences that are new, untried, and unfamiliar to them. They love ambiguous things rather than being upset by them. They love the now in virtually all settings, being aware that this is all that they have. They don't plan for a future event and let long periods of inactivity elapse as they await a payoff. The moments between events are just as livable as those taken up by the events themselves, and they have that uncanny ability to get every pleasure out of their daily lives. They are not postponers saving for a rainy day, and while their culture admonishes such behavior, they are unthreatened by reproachment. They gather in their happiness now, and when a future now arrives, they gather in that one as well. Strange, but this Nez individual is always enjoying simply because they see the folly of waiting to enjoy. This is not some special credo that they've adopted. It is the natural way of living, very much like that of any child or all animals. Grabbing heavy doses of present moment fulfillment, while most normals spend their lives waiting for their payoffs and never being able to seize them. These people are strikingly independent people. They are out of the nest. And while they have a strong love and devotion for family, they see independence as far superior to dependence in all relationships. They treasure their own freedom from expectations. Their relationships are built upon respect for the right of an individual to make any decision for themselves. Their love means no imposition of values on the loved ones. They put a high premium on their own privacy, and this view often leaves normals feeling snubbed or rejected. They like to be alone at times, and they will go to great lengths to ensure that such privacy is protected. You will not find Nez people in numerous love relationships. They are selective about their love, and those they love are few in number, but they're also very deeply and sensitively loving. It is difficult for normal people to love a Nez person because they are adamant about their freedom from dependency. If someone needs them, they reject such a need as hurtful to the other as well as to themselves. They want those they love to be independent, to make their own choices, and to live their lives for themselves, getting all that they are capable of achieving in the way of fulfillment. While they enjoy and want others to be with them, they want even more for them to make it without any crutches or leaning. Thus, the moment you start leaning on a Nez person, you'll find them disappearing, first emotionally and then physically as well. They inwardly refuse to be dependent or depended upon in a mature relationship. With children, they provide a model of a caring person, but they encourage self-reliance almost from the very beginning, with a great amount of love offered at every turn. You will find an uncommon absence of approval-seeking in your Nez associate. They simply are able to function without much approval and applause from others. They do not seek out strokes and honors as most normals do. They are unusually free from the good opinions of others, almost uncaring about whether someone else likes what they're said or done. They do not attempt to shock others or to gain approval by giving a damn about it on the surface. No, these are people who are so internally organized that they are literally unconcerned about the opinions of others in terms of evaluating their own behaviors. They are not oblivious to applause and approval. They just don't seem to need it. They can be almost blunt in their honesty, since they do not couch their messages in carefully worded phrases designed to please the recipient. Instead, they simply live. And if you want to know what they think, that's exactly what you'll hear. Conversely, when you give them feedback about themselves, they will not be destroyed or otherwise immobilized if you disliked it. They will take the data you provide, filter it through their own think tank, and use it for their own self-growth. No needs to be loved by everyone. No inordinate wish to be approved by all for everything that they do. They recognize that they will always incur disapproval, and they are not unusual in that they are able to function as they, rather than some external other dictates. As you watch your Nez character, you will note someone who is not perfectly enculturated. You are not looking at a rebel, but instead a person who makes choices that are sensible, even if they conflict with what everybody else does. You'll see someone who can ignore petty rules if they make no sense, and someone who quietly shrugs at the petty conventions that are such an important part of so many lives. You will not see a cocktail partier, nor a person engaging in small talk because it's the polite thing to do. This Nez individual is truly his or her own person. And while they see the culture as an important part of their own lives, they refuse to be ruled by it or to become a slave to it, not rebelliously attacking, but rather knowing internally when to ignore or shrug, and simply function in a most astonishingly clear-headed and sensible way. Non-Aronia Zone folks know how to laugh and how to create laughter. They find humor in virtually all situations, and they can laugh at the most absurd as well as the most solemn of occasions. They are laughers. They love to help others to laugh, and they are facile at creating humor. These are not serious, ponderous folks who plow through life with a stony grimness about their face. Instead, they are doers who are often scorned by normals as being frivolous at the wrong time. They do not have good timing, for they know in their own souls that there is really no such thing as the right thing at the right place. They love the incongruous, yet they are unhostile in their humor, never, but never using ridicule as their means of creating laughter. They don't laugh at people, they laugh with them. They laugh at life, and they see the whole thing as fun, even though they are often very deliberate in their own pursuits. But when they step back and look at life and know they aren't going any place in particular, and they are able to enjoy and create an atmosphere wherein others can more readily choose joy for themselves, they are fun to have around. Invite them the next time, if you can find them. These are people who accept themselves without complaint. They know that they are human beings, and that being so involves certain kinds of very human things. They know that they look a certain way, and they accept it. If tall, that's okay, and so is short. Bald is fine, and so is lots of hair. They can live with sweat. They are not phony about their physical humanity. They've accepted themselves, and therefore they are the most natural of people. No hiding behind artificialities, no apologizing for what they are. They don't know how to be offended by anything that is human. If they wake up with their nose in an armpit, they aren't offended. They like themselves, and they accept where they are. Similarly, they accept all of nature for what it is, rather than wishing it were otherwise. They never complain about things that won't change, such as heat waves, rainstorms, the water being cold, and the like. They accept themselves and the world as it is. No pretenses, no groaning, simply acceptance. Follow them around for years and you'll never hear self-depreciation or wishing. You'll see doers doing. You'll see them observing the world the way it is. analogous to a child who accepts the natural world and simply gets in there and enjoys it for all it's worth. Your Nez affiliate will be an appreciator of the natural world. They will love being outdoors in nature and tripping around in all that is unspoiled and original. They especially love things like mountains and sunsets and rivers and flowers, trees, animals, and virtually all flora and fauna. They are naturalists as people, unceremonious and non-pretentious. Likewise, they love the naturalness of the universe. They are not busy seeking out taverns and nightclubs and parties and conventions and smoke-filled rooms and theaters and the like, although they are certainly capable of enjoying such activities to the fullest. Rather, they are more at peace with nature, God's world, if you will. And while they are often function almost daily in a man-made world, their true interests are in the wilderness. They are also capable of appreciating what has become stale for others over and over again. They never tire of a sunset or a trip in the woods. A bird in flight is a magnificent sight, over and over again, and they seem transfixed in their repeated pleasure at observing natural phenomena. A caterpillar never grows tiresome, nor does a mother cat giving birth to her kittens. Over and over and over again they spontaneously appreciate. Many normals find this artificial and contrived, but to the Nez person, they don't even notice what the normals think, since they are in awe at the vastness of possibilities for present moment fulfillment. They can watch a seagull for hours. And while others might say, "Come on, let's go," they are in a trance. They have penetrating insight into the behavior of others, and what may seem almost complex and undecipherable to others, the Nez person sees as clear and understandable. The problems that immobilize so many others are often viewed as only minor annoyances to the Nez person. And this lack of emotional involvement in problems makes this person able to surmount barriers that remain insurmountable to most others. They have insight into themselves, and they see right away what others are attempting to do to them. They can shrug and ignore while others are angered and immobilized. They are never perplexed and stumped as they go through their days, and what may seem to be confusing and insoluble to most others is often viewed by the Nez person as a very simple condition with a direct resolution. They are not focused on problems in their lives, in their emotional world, being divorced emotionally from these problem areas. Thus, a problem is really only an obstacle to be scaled, rather than a reflection of what they are or aren't as a person. Their self-worth is located within, and therefore any external concerns can be viewed objectively, rather than as in any way a threat to their personhood. This is a most difficult aspect of the Nez person to understand, since most people are easily threatened by external events, ideas, or people. The Nez person does not know how to be threatened, and this very characteristic makes him threatening to most normal people. Your Nez observers will never engage in useless fighting. She or he is not a bandwagoner, jumping on various causes as a way of bringing importance to herself or himself. If fighting will help bring about change, then fighting will be done. But never will they find it necessary to fight in a cause that is useless, and where the fighting will only make them weaker. These are not martyrs. They do. They are almost always engaged in work that will make other people's lives more pleasant and tolerable. They are helpers, warriors, if you will, on the forefront of social change, and yet they don't take their struggles to bed with them every night for an early death, and as a breeding ground for ulcers, heart disease, and other physical disorders. They wear blinders when it comes to stereotyping. They often don't even notice the physical differences in people, including racial, ethnic, size, sexual, etc. They are not surface people judging others by their looks. While they may appear to be hedonistic and selfish, they spend vast amounts of time in the service of others. Why? Because they like it that way. These are not sickly people, your Nez folks. They don't believe in being immobilized by typical ailments such as influenza, colds, headaches, and so on. They believe in their ability to rid themselves of most such maladies, and they never go around telling others how bad they feel, how tired they are, or what diseases are currently infecting their bodies. They treat their bodies well. They like themselves, and consequently they eat well, exercise regularly as a way of living, and refuse to experience most of the infirmities that render many people helpless for various periods of time. They like to live well, and they do. You will also note a very honest person as you watch your Nez person functioning in life. They are not evasive with their responses, nor do they pretend to lie about anything. They see lying as a distortion of their own reality, and so they will not participate in such artificial, self-delusional behavior. While they are private people and will not necessarily share everything that occurs in their life space, they also shun having to distort in order for another person to avoid hurting themselves. While they believe that they are in charge of their own world, so too do they believe others are as well. Thus they will behave in ways that will often be perceived as cruel by normals, but in fact they are simply allowing others to make their own decisions and to deal effectively with what is, rather than what they would like it to be. You will find an absence of blame in your Nez people. They are internal in their personality orientation, and they refuse to ascribe responsibility to others for what they are. Similarly, they will not spend a great deal of time talking about others and focusing on what someone else has done or failed to do. They do not talk about people, they talk with them. They do not blame others, they help others to assign responsibility where it belongs. They are not gossips or spreaders of evil information about others. They are so busy being effective in their own lives that they have no time for the petty connivances that so occupy many people's lives. Doers do. Critics blame and complain. This Nez comrade will have very little preoccupation with order, organization, or systems in their lives. Not slobs, mind you, but also no need to have things and people fit into their own perceptions of how everything ought to be. They have no oughts for others. They see everyone as having choices, and those petty behaviors that drive so many normals insane because things are out of place are for the Nez person simply the result of someone else's decisions. They do not see the world as having to be any specified way. They have no preoccupation with cleanliness or orderliness. They exist in a functional way, and if everything isn't fitting in as they would prefer, they find that's all right too. Organization, then, for the Nez person is simply a facilitative accompaniment rather than an end unto itself. You'll note Nez people as being very creative because of this lack of organizational neurosis. They attack any concern in their own unique way, be it making a bowl of soup, writing a report, or mowing the grass. They apply their own matchless self to the act, and the result is a creative approach to everything. They don't have to do it a certain way. They don't consult manuals or ask experts. They simply attack the problem as they see fit. This is creativity, and without exception, Nez people are creative. These Nez chums are people with exceptionally high energy levels. They seem to require less sleep, and yet they are excited about living. They do, and they are healthy. They can muster up tremendous surges of energy for completing a task because they choose to be involved in it as a present moment fulfilling activity. Their energy is not supernatural. It is simply the result of loving life and all of the activities in it. They don't know how to be bored. All life events present opportunities for doing, thinking, feeling, and living, and they know how to muster up their energy in virtually all life circumstances. Were they to be imprisoned, they would use their minds in creative ways to avoid the paralysis of loss of interest. Boredom is not in their lives because they are channeling the same energy that others have in productive ways for themselves and facilitating the completion of their tasks. Nez people are aggressive truth seekers. They never know enough. They search for more and want to learn each and every present moment of their lives. They are not concerned with having to do it right or having done it wrong. If it doesn't work or it doesn't accomplish the greatest amount of good, then it is discarded rather than mulled over in self-punishment. They are truth seekers in the learning sense, always excited about learning more and never feeling like they are a finished product. Their search for more is even tiring to observe, yet Nez people don't seem to tire of it.
If they are around a barber, they want to learn about barbering. They never feel or act superior, showing off their merit badges for others to applaud. They learn from children and stockbrokers and animals. They want to know more about what it means to be a welder, a crocheter, or a corporate vice president. They are learners, not teachers. They never know enough, and they don't know how to get snobbish or superior, since they never feel that way. Every person, every object, every moment represents for the Nez person an opportunity for knowing more. And they are aggressive in their truth-seeking, not waiting for it to come along, but going after it. Talking to a waitress, asking a dentist what it feels like to have your hands in someone's mouth all day, or inquiring of the poet what it is meant by this or that line. The Nez ally is not afraid to fail. In fact, they often welcome it. You see, they do not equate being successful in any enterprise with being successful as a human being. Since the Nez person has their self-worth entrenched from within, any external piece of behavior can be viewed objectively as simply doing or not doing. Failing, or somebody else's editorial opinion, is not to be feared when it cannot affect the self-worth. And this Nez chap has learned how to avoid such a trap. Thus they will try anything, participate just because it's fun, and never fear having to explain themselves, or that neurotic humiliation that comes from raising others' opinions higher than one's own. Similarly, your Nez companion does not choose anger in any immobilizing way, using the same logic and not having to think it through each time since it has become a way of life. The Nez person doesn't say to himself that other people should behave differently and that events should be otherwise. They accept others where they are, and they work at changing events that they dislike. Thus anger, or being upset when an expectancy is disconfirmed, is impossible, because the expectancies just aren't there to begin with. You won't be watching an emotional eunuch. Rather, you'll see a person who is capable of eliminating emotions that are in any way self-destructive and facilitating the experience of those which are self-enhancing. You'll see your Nez friend display an admirable lack of defensiveness. They won't play games and try to impress others. They don't dress for others' approval, nor do they go through the same proper motions of explaining themselves. They have a simplicity and naturalness, and they won't get seduced into making issues of small or big things. They aren't arguers or hot-headed debaters. They simply state their views, listen to others, and recognize the futility of trying to convince someone else to be like they are. They'll simply say, "That's all right. We're just different. We don't have to agree." Letting it go at that, without any need to win an argument or persuade the opponent of the wrongness of his position. They are unafraid to give a bad impression, but they don't strive to do so. The values of the Nez person are not local. They do not identify with the family, the neighborhood, the community, the city, the state, or the country. They see themselves as belonging to the human race. And to them, an unemployed Austrian is no better or worse than an unemployed Californian. Similarly, they are not patriotic to a special boundary. Rather, they see themselves as a part of the whole of humanity. They take no glee at all in having more enemy dead, since war itself to them is a human problem. The lines drawn by men to describe how one should be affiliated are not subscribed to by the Nez person. They transcend traditional boundaries, which often causes others to label them as rebels and non-patriots. Nez people have no heroes, no idols. They view all people as human, and they place no one above their own heads in importance. They do not demand justice at every turn. When someone else has more privileges, they see that as a benefit to that person, rather than as a reason for him being unhappy. When playing an opponent, they don't want him or her to do well. Rather than wishing them a poor performance, they insist that they do well themselves, in order that they might not win by default. They want to be victorious and effective on their own, rather than gaining through the shortcomings of others. They do not insist that everyone be equal, but most importantly, they look inward for their happiness, rather than to how others are living. They are not critics, nor do they take pleasure in other people's misfortunes. They are too busy being to notice what their neighbors are doing. Most significantly, as you watch this Nez person functioning, you'll see a person who loves him or herself. They are motivated by their desire to grow, and they always treat themselves well when given the option. They have no room for self-pity self-rejection in any form, or non-self-love. If you ask them the question, do you like yourself? You'll get a resounding, of course I do. This Nez person is a rare bird indeed. Each day is a delight. They have it together, and they live all of their present moments. Not problem-free, but free from emotional immobility as a result of the problems. The measure of their mental health is not in whether they slip, everybody slips, but in what they do when they slip. Lay there and whine about having fallen? No. They get up, dust themselves off, and get on with the business of living. Nez folks don't chase after happiness. They live, and happiness is their payoff. By using your present moments for maximizing your fulfillment, you will be one of those Nez folks, rather than an observer. Such a delightful idea, and you can begin that choice right now, if you choose to. Everything you need to have total happiness and fulfillment and success and love in your life, you already have. You already have it right now. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you have it right this minute. Just a matter of deciding to believe that. A woman asked me one time, what are the blocks to my happiness? She said, what are the blocks? I want to know the blocks. I said, the belief that you have blocks. You believe you have blocks. As soon as you believe you have blocks, you create the need to have blocks. And now you want to find out what the blocks are. There are no blocks out there. If you send them all away, stop believing that you'll have blocks. Then you stop looking for the blocks, and you stop defending the blocks, and you look for something else. People tend to blame circumstances for their unhappiness. They say, someone close to me is sick, and that makes me unhappy. And I say to them, no, that doesn't make you unhappy. Someone else close to you is sick that cannot make you unhappy. And they say, well, how is that possible? What do you mean? They're sick and I'm unhappy and they must be making me unhappy. I say, no, supposing that same person was sick and you didn't know about it. You just didn't know they were sick. Could you be unhappy? Well, of course not. How could I be unhappy about something I didn't know about? Well, they were sick. Their sickness didn't cause you to be unhappy. Their sickness existed independent of you. It's when you find out about it and process it and think about it in a certain way and you say, oh, that shouldn't be happening. Oh, that's awful. Or that's my friend. Or that's my mother. Or those things shouldn't be happening to me. People don't want to take the responsibility and say, I am making myself unhappy by what I see in life. Now, you may not want to be joyful about someone close to you being sick, but you have to be responsible for what's going on inside of you. My job was to teach people how to find methods to be able to manage their emotions more effectively. I now believe that you have to be the method. Okay? There is no method that you can find. You can't rely on a method any more than if you're overweight, you can rely on a diet, or if you're smoking, you can rely on a cure or hypnotism or some kind of thing external to yourself. Or if you want to be religious, you can't rely on someone else to do it for you. It's that being that is the big difference. So that I began to see that managing one's own emotions was just a small part of the way. And the next step was in teaching people how to avoid being victimized by other people and other events and other institutions on the basis of you being more in control of your own emotions, that there are still a lot of people and things and events and so on that will try to control you, all right? That will try to victimize you. There will be efforts by many, many people, your spouse, your children, your boss, the people in the neighborhood, your friends, all people out there who, even though you're managing your own emotions, are still trying very hard to get you to be what they want you to be, or trying to tell you how you should lead your life. There will be fewer victims in life when people are unwilling to play victim. That you get treated in life the way you teach people to treat you. Again, responsibility for how you get treated in life has to go back to you.
if you've got people that abuse you, or are inconsiderate towards you, who do not like you, who are passing judgment on you, trying to control you, that only happens because you are willing to allow it. Not because the world is full of bad people. There's not any bad people out there in the world. I've heard it said that there's only 7 or 8 really bad people in the world. Of course, they move around a lot, so they're everywhere, right, to a lot of people. But the fact is that however you're getting treated in life, if you want it to change, you must, again, put the responsibility on yourself, no matter what the circumstances, no matter how bad it is for you, that instead of saying, why does my husband treat me this way? Why does my boss treat me this way? You say, what is it about me where I have allowed my boss or my husband or my children to treat me this way? How can I teach them that I'm not willing to put up with that any longer? And learning that is a very important, valuable lesson for any human being. I believe I was directed to help people to understand that they have greatness within them and not to fear that greatness. That the reason people are not good at getting what they want out of life is not so much that they don't have the skills or the abilities, but in fact they don't think that they deserve it. Or if they do think they deserve it, they're afraid of it because it's bigger than I am. And there's a truth out there in the universe someplace, however it works, and I'm studying this now for some books I'll be writing in the future, that says you are not going to get it all. You are it all. You are not going to find happiness. You are happiness. You bring happiness to what you do in life rather than trying to get happiness out of what you do. Big, big difference between those two premises, because you're not searching for happiness anymore when you have it within you. I always tell people I'm not in the pleasure business. Right? I'm in the happiness business or the joy business, not in the pleasure business, even though pleasure's great. The distinction I make here is that when you become enlightened, you begin to find happiness in the absences of pleasure in your life. You can find happiness in that. You can embrace your colds, if you will, your headaches or your backaches or whatever, as opportunities, rather than saying that if I don't have all pleasure, then I can't be happy. What you say is, I am happy even with the things that I don't like that are going on in my life right now. So you learn to find joy in those and embrace those things rather than trying to always send them away. And the suffering that you're experiencing, if you just stop right now and look at your payoffs for it and why you continue to do it, you will see that your suffering comes from wanting the world to be different than it is, or wanting somebody in the world to be different than they are. And when you stop that, when you just accept rather than want, then your suffering has to go out the window with it. And this is not to say that you can't desire. Thing. You don't even have to say you can't want things. You can certainly want anything. But to need it for me to be happy must go. To understand what we're talking about here, you must understand that bringing happiness to something is very much different than trying to get it out of something. And when you are bringing it to something, then you always have it. When you're looking for it, it will always elude you. Always. Make no mistake about it that every emotion you experience in your life is a choice. Not that they're bad. Emotions are wonderful. But if any emotion you experience in your life is immobilizing,
keeping you from being where you want to be, keeping you from your purpose, from your mission, from your joy in life. And don't forget that the major purpose of life is to enjoy it. Look, if you learn how to enjoy your life, every moment you have, even the rotten ones, if you can do that, do you understand that you can never be a burden to anyone else? Isn't that the least selfish thing you can do? Isn't that the most glorious and graceful and loving thing you can do, is never be anybody else's burden? That's not selfish to know how to enjoy your life. It's selfless. It's not putting other people down at your expense or anybody else's expense or elevating yourself up to make others look. It's nothing like that. There is only one morality in the universe. Every human being has a right to live their life as they choose to live it, as long as they don't interfere with anyone else's right to do the same. Now, I want to tell you,
See, you can image anything for yourself. You can visualize for yourself. You can never visualize for other people to be different than they are. You don't have that kind of capacity, all right? Each person's karma is their own. Each person's life is their own to live. You cannot say, I'm going to image you doing this for me, and if you don't, then I'm going to be happy. What you can say is, I am going to have an image of myself not being upset when you don't do the things that I want you to do, that I would like it better if you did. When you get that image inside of you, then if they do it, that's terrific. And if they don't, you don't look at that as not terrific. You look at that as where they are right now. And Robert Frost had a wonderful definition of love. He said that we love the things we love for what they are. And that same thing goes for people, for what they are, not for what I would like them to be. And we don't alter or want to alter the things we love. You love it for what it is, rather than what it can do for you. Same with your children.
I have spent the last 10 months of my life almost exclusively in working on a book that will be out in the fall called What Do You Really Want for Your Children? And it's about applying the principles of all of my books to the raising of children. And I think about what is important. What is it that we want for our children? One of the things that I want for my children, for all the children of our world, which I think of them all as mine, I think we're all one, we're all in this thing together, is for them to grow up believing that they have a choice. You know, I have 5 children, and it's rare to see my children fight. They haven't been grown up on fighting. They have never had fighting reinforced as something that is only normal and kids only fight. They've always had a kind of a belief system that it's not normal to fight and be angry and to hate each other, and that those impulses are things that we can learn to tame and not have, because fighting and anguish and pain and despair are things that bring us down and kind of destroy our lives. My children have grown up with the different attitudes about almost everything, but one of the things they are is full of love. When my daughter was in the 2nd grade, she came home and she said, "Billy doesn't like me. Billy doesn't like me." She was all upset about that. I said, "I understand that. This is Billy's day. It's one of the things Billy does on Tuesdays. Do you like you?" "Oh yeah, of course I like me." I said, "Well, that's all you've got." She'd go away, and she was used to her daddy talking to her weird like this. So many other daddies and mommies in the neighborhood say, "Oh my goodness, what can we do to get Billy to like you? Let's see, maybe we'll give him some money." You know, maybe we'll let him play with your sandbox, or maybe we'll do whatever we can. You see, even at 2, a child doesn't have to learn that Billy's behavior toward her ought to be anything that brings her down. Do you understand that every moment in your life that you spend upset, despaired, anguished, angry, hurt because of the behavior of anybody else in your life is a moment in which you have given up control of your life? is a moment in which you have said to the people in your world, what you think of me is more important than what I think of myself. And so I will do whatever I have to do to get you to like me. Instead of, I will fill myself with love, and I will send that out into the world. And those that accept it, that's wonderful. And those that don't, that just happens to be where they are now. There is a karma to this planet that I'm only beginning to understand. But one thing I know is that when I put responsibility on me for my suffering, for my pain, for my difficulty, and when I send out love as my reaction to anybody else's anguish, that I get it back. And one of the nicest things about the universe is that it pays the highest interest rate of any bank on our planet. The universe gives 20 to 25% interest. If you send out $1,000 worth of love, you get back about $1,300 every time. You get your 1,000 back just to prove that what goes around comes around. And then you get a bonus. And the bonus is there just to remind you, this is the way to behave toward everyone.
When you give something out into the universe, you get it back. In the simplest form, if somebody's walking down the street with a scowl on their face and you say, good morning, how are you this morning? Here's a newspaper for you, or whatever it is, and you just say something pleasant and loving and nice, you will see something pleasant and nice come back to you most of the time. If you don't, then that's a test. That's not a, see, I told you it's not right. That's just your test. Most of the time, it will come back to you. A smile, you'll see, and you will feel better. Now, in the simplest form, that's what it is. That even applies to financial things. I remember a few years ago, my secretary was just all concerned about her income taxes, and she owed $500 more on her taxes, and it was the 14th of April. And she didn't know what she was going to do, and she didn't want to have to take out a loan and all of this. And I said, look, you've done so many great things for me this year. Here's $500. I'll just pay those taxes. I don't have any problem with it. I'll pay it. It won't affect me one way or the other. It wasn't really any great big gesture or magnanimous thing for me to do. It was just what seemed to be the right thing to do. The next day in the mail comes a check for $570 from Greece for an article that I had written for Family Circle magazine like 5 years before. It had been held up in some transaction in Greece, and there it was. The $500 back plus $70 as a bonus. That principle applies all the time for me in my life, I have found. And I didn't know that 10 years ago. I didn't know that if you give it away, it's like it's that circuitous nature of how each cell works. Remember the electrons that are circling around? They all just keep coming back. Everything just keeps coming back. And it works. And we are, when you think of an endless universe, we're still just tiny little cells. The same principle is working. But getting people who have been conditioned to believe that it's the bottom line and it's profits, and if I don't see it, then I don't believe it. And so in this technological, externally oriented, fast-paced kind of hectic society that we have created, we tend to forget some basic. Human principles. I tell people over and over again, your opinions are trivial. The opinions that you have about all the things and all the most profound problems in the world are essentially trivial, and they make almost no difference what your opinion is. It's your commitment to it that really makes all the difference in the world. If you're opposed to starvation and are doing nothing about it, then you're part of the problem.
You're not part of the solution at all. You're part of the problem. You're one more indifferent person who feels strongly but doesn't do anything, doesn't act on your beliefs. So the beliefs are important, but if they're not followed through by commitment, they just don't mean anything. And you take the most profound problem in the world and understand that you're trivializing it by having an opinion about it. And you take the tiniest, most insignificant problem in the world, and if you have a commitment to doing something about it, that's the most profound thing you can do. And raising my children, what I have tried to do is to teach them to back up what it is they say. All right? Don't just tell me what your opinions are about it. What are you doing? You have thoughts that you create. Then you have emotions that come from those thoughts. That's how our system works. And then you have behavior that comes from our feelings. And you don't bypass. All right? You need to have the opinion, and you certainly need to have the emotion that goes with it. But without the commitment, it's meaningless. It just doesn't make a difference in the world. And making a difference is what it's about. Making a difference is commitment. We just talked briefly about something else that I think is very important, and that is the importance of modeling, or being an example. The highest place you can get to is be the person who whatever it is that comes out of your mouth is what is. And that's the purest form of sanity there is. That's the highest place you can get to, where whatever you say is what you follow through on. And that precludes maybe exaggerating for making a point or something like that. When you let something come out of your mouth, or when you behave in a certain way, that it is consistent always with the beliefs that you have. You're going to exaggerate something that doesn't need to be exaggerated. And you stop yourself. This is the place I'm at now in my life, where I'm trying to do this more and more, working at this, where I might have just exaggerated by a number or something. 2 million books were sold last week instead of 150,000 or whatever it is. And stop yourself. Like the need to distort your reality. Where does that come from? Why do you need to do that? No one cares. It doesn't make any difference. So that when you're doing that, usually if you're lying in any way, you know when you're doing it that it's a distortion. And after a while, if you distort enough, it becomes a habit. And correcting that habit and really going to work on that, whether you call it integrity or whether you call it the ability to live by example, and being a model, like with your children, it's so important to live what it is that you say rather than to be something different for them or try to pretend that you're something different than you are. I don't just get up in front of an audience, or I don't just sit down and write about something that's nice for you, but I don't have to do that. I am it. And what I've written in Gifts from Icus and The Sky's the Limit, particularly in the Raising Children book, is what I am living each day of my life. Getting yourself to that point, that important integrity point, where what comes out of you is exactly what is in the world, and that if you're going to try to be persuasive or be a leader or make a difference in the world, then you do that by modeling, by providing an example up and down the line. And anytime you detract from that example, then you are not being authentic. And being authentic is a part of being enlightened, and it's very important to have that concept down cold. You can't be cheating on your income tax and punishing your children for being dishonest and be an authentic, enlightened person at the same time. You can't be blowing cigarettes in their face and telling them about the evils of addiction and be an enlightened, authentic person. You can't be out of shape and slobby and living a flabby lifestyle and tell your children about the importance of nutrition and be authentic and be an enlightened person. And you can't expect anybody that you work with in any business capacity to want to listen to what you say if what you say is different than what you are. That's very important.
About some of the benefits that a person can experience in his life as he stops focusing on the problem, starts focusing on the solution, stops focusing on what's going on outside in the world, maybe what he perceives as to be mistakes or wrong things influencing him and starts looking inside, what are some of the kinds of experiences that he'll start noticing in his life?
I think the first thing that you'll see a dramatic change in is the amount of time that you have left over when you give up all of the negative kind of emotions. How much more fulfilling and gratifying your life becomes. We'll start with your own physical health. 10 years ago, I weighed 30 pounds more than I do now. I wasn't exercising. I was not watching my nutrition. I was a candidate for a heart attack. I was not practicing good physical health principles. Now, I never really made a conscious decision to say, all right, I'm going on a diet. All right, I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to watch the sugar, and I'm going to get the salt out of my diet. And I'm not going to have caffeine in my diet, and I'm not going to have poisons in my system. I never did that. Those become natural outgrowths of self-love, the non-self-serving kind of self-love, the kind of self-love that is like having a quiet love affair with yourself, where you don't have to tell anybody. It's not necessary. It's just a given. It just is. You begin to see dramatic changes. I started running 10 years ago, and once I got myself into shape, I ran a minimum of 8 miles every day. And I got into a streak, and it's almost 9 years now of continuous, every day, never missing a day of running. And at this point, exercising and being trim is just what I am. I am trimness. I'm not trying to get there. When I gave up caffeine, I stopped looking for the method to give it up and became the treatment and no longer was the poison. What I'm really saying is that that is not me anymore, and you don't have to go through any pain and suffering in order to get there. It automatically becomes a response that your body, when you start conditioning it, when you put lots of water in your body and flush it out and keep it clean, that comes from a premise of self-love and some of these principles that I talked about earlier. For example, I used to love a nice greasy cheeseburger. The kind with the shiny buns, you know, the grease had come up on it, and lots of French fries, and the kind where you could squeeze it and, you know, you get some grease down in the plate, you know, and then dunk the bread in that. I used to eat like that. Now, I never said, all right, I'm going to stop doing that. I'm not doing that anymore because that's not bad for me. I don't want cholesterol or anything like that. You are not the poison. You are now the treatment. And these changes that take place are so dramatically wonderful. I mean, I can give you some specific things in my life that I do now that 5 years ago I would have thought you were crazy. I won't drive to the store. Not because I want to save gas or because I don't like driving. I love driving. I have a beautiful car and all that. I don't even think about it. I walk to the store. I walk almost everywhere I go. It has become a lifestyle with me. It seems so silly to me to fire up 4,000 pounds of steel to go get a 39-cent loaf of bread or whatever it is, when it's so wonderful to walk or to jog down there. And so I find myself, in addition to my running, walking 4 or 5 miles in a day, using that time creatively. All right, I walk where I used to run or where I used to drive. When I'm in a restaurant, I used to always put salt on everything before I even tasted it. I just put a lot of salt on, a lot of it. I don't even ask if there's salt on the table anymore. And I never made a decision not to do it. It just doesn't feel right in my body. Red meat is something that rarely comes into my life. Now I consume 1/4 of the amount of food that I used to, and I have 4 times as much energy. I sleep much less than I used to, and I haven't consciously made any decision other than to use love as the principle for making my life work. All right? So when you ask about the benefits in the physiological area are astounding, and they just seem to get a hold of you, and you begin to make intelligent choices or healthy choices that are good for the organism. They come about naturally when you start operating your life on this inner kind of glow that I'm talking about, this serenity. You see, I think that there's more to the universe than what the pragmatists would have us believe. I am open to everything being possible and operate from the premise that nobody knows enough to be a pessimist. All right? None of us know enough. We know so little about the universe. I mean, I laugh in the newspapers. Just last week I saw a story about the quasars, you know, these stars that are out at the edge of the universe. And I said, what is this edge of the universe? I mean, what's there at this edge? Is there a wall there? Or is there a cliff? I mean, what is it? And how did it get there? And what's on the other side? We can't comprehend within ourselves something that has no beginning and no end, because all the things that we are limited to in this space that we occupy now start with beginnings and ends. Everything has a cause and an effect. Try to contemplate for a moment a world which has no cause and effect. in which everything just is, just the way it is. And one thing doesn't cause the other. It is, and it always has been. Try to think of eternity, when we talk about an eternity, as something that we can't comprehend because we're confined in the body that we occupy to only think in terms of when we began and when we end. Look at your body right now, and look at your fingers, and look at your arms and all that, and remind yourself that who you are is not those things. That those fingers were very different when you were a month old. You still were. You still existed. You are not your fingers or your bones or your nose or your ears or your hair or any of those things. Those things have all undergone dramatic shifts in your lifetime, however old you are, and yet your essence, whoever you are, continues. It goes on, and it continues to occupy many, many different bodies. This is not a case for reincarnation. It's not a case for anything. It is looking at the world from a perspective of awe and magnificence and openness to everything being possible. And that whatever it is that you call mysticism or metaphysics or whatever is nothing more than just the things that we have been limited to because we only understand what we're confined to. We can have anything for ourselves when we're open to that. And that love principle that I talked about earlier, from one cell to the next, is what many scientists are beginning to speculate on as the source of energy that makes us all work, all right? And when we operate on that principle, as you look through all of the great teachings there have ever been, that one principle of self-acceptance, self-love, taking good care of yourself, all seems to permeate all of the teachings. That just seems to go back. That can't be an accident. There's got to be some truth to that. If you can accept that you are something other than just what your body is, even though it defines rationality and it defines scientific verification and all of that, you can accept that because we know that that's true. Bucky Fuller told us that 99% of what we are is untouchable, unsmellable, invisible. 99% of our essence. We can't get a hold of, we can't smell it, we can't touch it, and we can't see it. It's whatever that conscious awareness is that we experience for whoever we are. And that conscious awareness that we carry around with us can bring about magnificent changes in our lives. The physiological changes I've alluded to, without trying to change anything dramatically in us, when we become more and more enlightened, if you will, and that's a wonderful thing to know. I want to close with this letter. It's from a lady who has become a friend. Her name is Chloe Robinson. And she wrote me this letter after I spoke at the Seattle Center 6 months ago. Dear Wayne, I have just returned from hearing you speak at the Seattle Center, and no, I will not sleep a wink until I have written you a note to say thank you. I have anticipated hearing you ever since I purchased my ticket several weeks ago. I knew it would be wonderful, but it was even better than that. It was absolutely marvelous. In 1980, I left a marriage of 24 years with hardly anything more than my books and clothes. I had been taken care of and had no financial worries, and my husband and I were beginning to get into the mode where another few years and we would have been able to do just about anything our hearts desired, as we had just married off 2 daughters and our other 2 children were nearly grown. My leaving and the manner in which I did it, I moved to Hawaii, left everyone speechless, as I had always been such a devoted and unselfish person. Also the fact that I left with virtually nothing and asked for nothing in the divorce, plus had never worked, reaffirmed the feelings of everyone that I had indeed lost my mind. I had turned 40 that year, and it was also speculated that this was probably partly to blame. In actuality, my soul just finally cried, "Uncle." This lady's a writer. These last 4 years have been absolutely wonderful. Sure, I've had pain and I've had to learn many things about life and people the hard way, but I wouldn't trade them. I have grown and learned and finally become the kind of person I want to be. My own. At times the future has seemed scary, especially financially, but I know beyond a doubt that I'm on the right path. After a 2-year relationship with another wonderful person, I now believe that I am meant to go my path more or less by myself and not be tied to another person through a serious relationship. This does not make me unhappy or lonely. I now live each day almost hour by hour, live my life like the page of a book that is waiting for that day to write the story, and know that I'm on the right track regardless of what the rest of the world thinks. I am an artist and a writer, and I know that the time is not too far away when I will be able to share some of my feelings and thoughts with others and perhaps bring some hope and encouragement into their lives. I want to say to other people, dare to risk. Dare to face the unknown. Because if you don't, you aren't really alive. I have read each of your books many times, and when I was given gifts from ICUS for my birthday, I was thrilled. Little did I know what a truly beautiful gift it was for me. When I began reading it, I was puzzled, since this was so totally different from anything you had ever written before. I began the book about 10 o'clock one night, and I didn't stop reading it until I'd finished it. I cried through a great deal of it because it seemed to strike some chord in my soul that knew of the things which ICUS spoke, but which I had never been able to express, mainly because most people wouldn't have understood it. I was so excited and felt so emotional when I finished it that even though it was nearly 3 in the morning and I had to work the next day, I reread it again. I never did sleep that night, and yet felt more alive and awake at work than times when I had slept the prescribed 8 hours. I have just finished ICUS for the 7th time, and still get just as excited and emotional each time I read it. I've always been an avid reader. In the past 6 years, I've read tomes on Eastern religion and philosophy. But I can say without reservation, and I still don't know why this is, but ICUS has had the most profound effect on me of any book I've ever read. It is more than the words or the story. It is as if it has awakened in my soul that which is true and has been from the beginning of time. I can't even explain how I feel. I've given countless copies of the books for gifts, and when it wasn't received from some with the same passionate emotion I felt when I read it, I was incensed. I felt as if I was casting pearls before swine. Don't ask me why this particular book evokes such feelings for me. I don't know. Now listen, this is the paragraph. I was amazed, even talking to many people at the center tonight, how few of them had read it, even though they were great fans of yours. I've come to believe, particularly this past year, that we are each on a path, and when we commit our lives to growth and becoming our own person, we get on such a fast track that it is almost frightening. I believe that a book like Gifts from ICUS is one that until your consciousness is ready for it, it will not have an impact and just be passed off lightly or ignored. However, when a person is ready, look out. It is very powerful stuff. I know there will come a day when this book will be on the lips of everyone and will change the lives of many. It is more than a book. It is ancient truths that were finally given to someone to bring forth. You and ICUS now have a great responsibility to the world because these truths are now for the world. I am cultivating a beautiful garden of my own, and even though it doesn't have orderly flower beds, and it is made up of a potpourri of a little bit of everything, it is mine, and it is wonderful. Thank you. Chloe Robinson. And I think there's something in that for each one of you. If you get on that track where you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams, and you're willing to take the risks, and you're unconcerned about the past, and the future is just something that maybe you'll get and maybe you won't, and you visualize and image yourself being the kind of person you are, and above all else, you understand that your opinions are trivial. It's only your commitments that make a difference in the world. It's only your commitments. It's not what you think. It's what you do with what you think that makes a difference. I'm standing up here before you today when I could easily be someplace else because I remember the words of Gandhi when he was pulling out of his train station in India, and someone passed him a little note. They were crowded around everywhere, and they said, please just write something down for us as you leave, as he was pulling out of Calcutta. And he wrote down on a little piece of paper, when they asked him to write a message, he said, I am my message. The cosmic erroneous zone. If you solve this one, you'll have it all. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.